Hey guys! Tonight we are going to see why it sucks to be born as in medieval times. Before that, take a moment to like and subscribe. But only you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comment where you tuning from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see who's joining from the world. Make yourself comfortable. Perhaps pull the blanket a little closer, settle into your favorite sleeping position, and let the world outside become just a little quieter. Now, imagine that instead of drifting off in the 21st century, you are about to wake up somewhere in medieval Europe. There are no alarms, no electric lights, no running water, no heating, no refrigerator waiting in the kitchen. No pharmacies, hospitals, or supermarkets just around the corner. Only the gentle crackle of a fire, the smell of wood smoke, and a life that is about to become much harder than you might expect. The Middle Ages are often remembered through stories of magnificent castles, noble knights, grand feasts, and heroic adventures. It's an image that has inspired countless books, films, and games. But those stories usually belong to a very small number of people. Tonight, we aren't following a king. We aren't joining a knight on a glorious quest. We aren't living in a great stone castle overlooking green valleys. Instead, we'll spend our time with the people history so often forgets. The farmers, the millers, the shepherds, the bakers, the mothers and fathers who worked from sunrise until long after sunset, hoping that this year's harvest would be enough to carry their family through another winter. As we gently wander through this journey together, you'll discover that everyday life in medieval times was filled with challenges we rarely think about today. Simple things: finding clean water, keeping warm through the winter, treating an illness, or even surviving childhood were never guaranteed. Many comforts we barely notice now would have seemed almost magical to someone living 800 years ago. And yet, for all of its hardships, medieval life wasn't simply one long story of misery. People still laughed. Children still played whenever they found the chance. Neighbors helped one another. Festivals brought music to village squares. Church bells marked the passing of peaceful days. Even in difficult times, people found reasons to celebrate, to hope, and to carry on. So this isn't a story meant to frighten you. It's an invitation to slow down, to step into another world, and to quietly imagine what everyday life might have been like for an ordinary person born centuries before modern comforts existed. Over the coming chapters, we'll begin with your very first breath and gently follow your life through childhood, work, family, illness, old age, and everything in between. There's no need to hurry. History unfolds at its own gentle pace. So, as the fire crackles softly, the wind drifts through the trees, and the village settles into another peaceful evening, close your eyes if you'd like. Take one slow, comfortable breath. And together, let's travel back to a time when life moved more slowly, but surviving each day required more strength than most of us can imagine. Our story begins with your birth. Your bad luck begins. Take another slow breath. Allow the sounds of the modern world to drift a little farther away. The hum of electricity, the glow of screens, the distant traffic. For now, let all of it fade into silence. Instead, imagine the gentle darkness of a spring evening in medieval Europe, sometime in the 13th century. The air carries the scent of damp earth after a light rain. Somewhere beyond the fields, an owl calls softly into the night. A small stream murmurs over smooth stones, following the same path it has carved for countless generations. Above, the stars shine with remarkable clarity, untouched by city lights, their reflections trembling in quiet ponds scattered across the countryside. In the distance sits a tiny village. There are no straight roads leading toward it, only narrow footpaths worn smooth by years of footsteps. A handful of cottages rest close together, their walls made from timber woven with branches and covered in pale clay. Their roofs are thick with straw, and from nearly every chimney rises a slow ribbon of smoke that disappears into the cool night air. One cottage glows a little brighter than the others. Inside, a family waits. A child is about to be born. There is no hospital waiting just down the road. No ambulance. No bright delivery room filled with carefully sterilized instruments. There are no machines quietly measuring heartbeats, no shelves lined with medicines, and no doctors standing nearby with years of formal medical training. Instead, the room is lit by flickering candles and the warm orange glow of a fire that never truly goes out. The floor is packed earth. The furniture is simple. Wooden stools. A rough table. A sturdy chest holding the family's few treasured possessions. Everything in the room has been built to last, repaired countless times, and cared for with patient hands. The people gathered here know one another well. An experienced village midwife moves calmly about the room, carrying knowledge that has been passed from one generation to the next, not through books, but through memory and experience. She has welcomed many children into the world, though she also knows that not every birth ends happily. Family members wait quietly outside. Some whisper gentle prayers. Others simply listen. No one speaks very loudly. Birth, in the medieval world, is both ordinary and extraordinary. It happens every day. And yet every birth carries uncertainty. For a mother, bringing a child into the world is among the most dangerous moments of her life. Today, many complications can be treated within minutes by skilled medical teams. In the medieval countryside, those same complications often had no solution at all. If heavy bleeding begins, if the baby is positioned incorrectly, if infection follows, there is very little anyone can do except hope, pray, and offer comfort. The midwife works carefully. She has herbs gathered from nearby woods and gardens. She knows which plants may ease pain, which might calm a fever, and which old remedies have earned the trust of generations. Some truly help. Some probably do very little. No one can be entirely certain. Medicine, as we understand it today, is still centuries away. Outside, the village carries on with quiet patience. The baker has long since banked the fire inside his oven. The blacksmith's forge has cooled. The chickens have settled onto their perches. Even the sheep seem wrapped in peaceful sleep beneath the open sky. The world does not pause for one family's worries. It simply continues, just as it always has. Hours pass. The fire crackles softly. The wind brushes against the thatched roof. At last, a tiny cry breaks the silence. You've arrived. The room relaxes. Smiles appear. Someone quietly thanks God. Another gently wraps you in clean linen, precious cloth carefully prepared long before this day arrived. For a brief and beautiful moment, everyone simply watches you breathe. Your story has begun. But in the Middle Ages, surviving birth is only the first small victory. The days ahead remain uncertain. During your first year of life, dangers wait quietly in places no one can see. Illness may arrive without warning. A fever that seems harmless in the morning can become deadly before another sunrise. An infection too small to notice may grow into something impossible to stop. Food may become scarce if the harvest fails. Winter may arrive earlier than expected. Even families who love their children with all their hearts cannot always protect them from the world around them. Because of this, medieval parents often celebrated each new milestone with quiet gratitude. A first smile. A first tooth. A first birthday. None of these moments were taken for granted. Each one was a small miracle. Yet despite the uncertainty, childhood was welcomed with genuine joy. Parents sang gentle lullabies beside the fire. Grandparents shared old stories remembered from their own childhoods. Brothers and sisters peeked curiously into the cradle. Life could be fragile, but it was also deeply cherished. Perhaps that is one of the quiet lessons the medieval world still offers us. When tomorrow is never guaranteed, today becomes precious. And so, wrapped safely beside the warm hearth, listening to the steady rhythm of rain upon the thatched roof and the soft breathing of your sleeping family, you drift into your very first peaceful sleep. Your journey through medieval life has only just begun. Morning arrives gently, not with the sound of an alarm clock, but with a rooster somewhere beyond your cottage window. The first rays of sunlight slip through tiny gaps in the wooden shutters, painting thin golden lines across the packed earth floor. Outside, the village is slowly waking. A dog stretches lazily near the doorway. Smoke begins to curl from chimneys once again as families rekindle the embers they carefully preserved through the night. The day begins much as it did yesterday, and much as it will tomorrow. If you were born into this medieval village, your world would be wonderfully simple and remarkably small. Today, we can travel hundreds of miles before sunset. We can cross oceans in a single day. We can see photographs from distant countries, read books written on the other side of the planet, or speak instantly with someone thousands of miles away. For you, none of that exists. Your entire universe might stretch no farther than a few neighboring villages. The fields surrounding your home seem endless. The nearby forest feels ancient. The little river winding past the mill appears as permanent as the stars themselves. Beyond those familiar places lies a world you've only heard about in stories. Perhaps there is a great city somewhere beyond the hills. Perhaps there is a king living in an enormous castle. Perhaps merchants sail across seas carrying silk, spices, and precious metals from lands whose names sound almost magical. But these places belong more to imagination than experience. Most people living in medieval Europe never traveled very far from the place where they were born. There was little reason to. Travel was slow. Roads were often little more than muddy tracks worn into the countryside by carts and wandering feet. After heavy rain they became rivers of thick clay. During winter they froze hard beneath the frost. In spring they softened once more beneath melting snow. A journey that takes us an hour by car today might require several long days on foot. And walking was the usual way to travel. Every mile demanded time. Every mile demanded energy. Every mile carried uncertainty. So life naturally remained close to home. Your village became your whole world. You would know nearly everyone by name. You would recognize each family's cottage. You would learn which apple tree blossomed first every spring, which field flooded after heavy rain, and where the wildflowers appeared as summer quietly unfolded. Even the seasons felt like familiar neighbors returning year after year. Spring arrived with birdsong and fresh green shoots. Summer filled the air with buzzing bees and long evenings beneath fading sunlight. Autumn painted the trees in warm shades of amber and gold while everyone hurried to gather the harvest before colder weather arrived. Then came winter. Quiet. Still. Patient. Snow softened every sound. Smoke drifted lazily upward into pale skies. Families gathered close around the fire, repairing tools, spinning wool, telling stories, and waiting together for the earth to awaken once again. Without calendars hanging on kitchen walls or weather forecasts on glowing screens, nature became your clock. The blooming flowers. The returning swallows. The lengthening shadows. The first frost upon the fields. These quiet signs told everyone what needed to be done. The world itself became the calendar. There was comfort in its rhythm. Of course, a small world also meant a small understanding of what lay beyond it. News traveled slowly. Sometimes very slowly. A traveler arriving from another town might carry stories that had taken weeks to reach your village. A wandering merchant might describe mountains taller than clouds or cities filled with people from distant kingdoms. Children listened with wide eyes. Adults smiled politely, never entirely sure which tales were true and which had grown a little larger during the journey. The unknown naturally inspired wonder. It also inspired fear. Deep forests were not simply collections of trees. They became places where old legends lived. A strange sound after sunset might be explained by wandering spirits. An unexpected illness could be blamed on unseen forces. A bright comet crossing the night sky might cause the whole village to wonder whether it carried an important message. Without modern science to explain every mystery, imagination gently filled the empty spaces. To us, these beliefs may seem unusual. Yet they also made the world feel full of meaning. Every storm had a story. Every ancient oak carried memories. Every quiet hill seemed to guard secrets older than anyone could remember. Life unfolded at a slower pace because there was simply less to distract you. No endless stream of headlines. No constant messages asking for your attention. No clocks urging you to hurry from one appointment to another. The sunrise told you it was time to begin. The sunset reminded you it was time to rest. Between those two moments lay an ordinary day. Perhaps tending sheep. Perhaps planting barley. Perhaps gathering firewood with friends while birds sang overhead. The days were demanding. But they were rarely rushed. There is something strangely peaceful about imagining such a life. To know every path beneath your feet. To recognize every face you meet. To watch the same hills change gently with every passing season. Your world may have been small, but it was deeply familiar. Still, a tiny world has its limits. If crops failed, there was no supermarket waiting in the next town. If illness spread through the village, there were few places to escape. If opportunity lay somewhere beyond the horizon, reaching it was far more difficult than simply deciding to go. The horizon itself could feel like the edge of existence. Most people would spend their entire lives beneath the same sky, walking the same fields, hearing the same church bell ring across the valley morning after morning. And perhaps, without realizing it, they became as much a part of the landscape as the old oak beside the village green or the river quietly winding toward distant lands they would never see. As evening returns once more, the fields grow quiet. The last birds settle into the trees. The fire inside your family's cottage begins to glow softly against the gathering darkness. Outside, countless stars slowly appear overhead. They are the same stars that shine above every kingdom, every mountain, and every distant sea. Even if you never travel there. For now, your little village is your entire universe. And tomorrow, as always, the sun will rise over it once again. The morning arrives as it always does. The first light stretches across the fields, turning every blade of grass silver with dew. A gentle mist rests low over the valley, and somewhere in the distance, the church bell greets another ordinary day. You are still very young. The world feels enormous. Every flower beside the path is worth stopping to admire. Every butterfly seems to have an important destination. The village dog happily follows anyone willing to scratch behind its ears. To you, life is simply unfolding one quiet day at a time. You do not yet know that, in the medieval world, much of your future has already been decided. Not because anyone wishes you harm, but because this is simply how society works. Today, people often speak about following their dreams, finding their passion, choosing a career, moving across the country, starting over, reinventing themselves. These ideas would sound wonderfully strange to most people living in the Middle Ages. For them, life was less about choosing a path, and more about continuing the one already beneath their feet. If your parents were farmers, you would almost certainly become a farmer. If your father repaired shoes, you would probably learn the same careful trade. If your family baked bread, the comforting scent of fresh loaves would likely remain part of your life from childhood until old age. Skills passed quietly from one generation to the next, much like family stories or treasured recipes. There was comfort in this rhythm. Children learned by watching. Parents taught through patience rather than classrooms. Little by little, work became as familiar as breathing. Long before you considered yourself an adult, your hands already understood many of the tasks your family depended upon each day. In a way, every village was a living library. The blacksmith knew iron. The miller understood grain. The shepherd watched the changing weather. The carpenter knew the language of wood. The midwife carried years of experience that no book could fully contain. Knowledge lived in people, and people carefully shared it with those who came after them. There was something quietly beautiful about that. Yet this way of life also left little room for change. If you happened to dream of becoming something entirely different, a sailor, perhaps, or a scholar, or a merchant traveling across distant kingdoms, those dreams often remain just that. Dreams. Not because they lacked imagination, but because everyday survival required stability. Families depended upon every member contributing in familiar ways. A son who suddenly wished to leave the farm meant one less pair of hands during harvest. A daughter who moved far away meant one less person to help care for younger children, prepare food, or tend the household. Everyone's work mattered. Every person's effort helped the entire family endure another season. Even beyond your household, society itself was arranged in careful layers. Most villages belonged to the lands of a local lord. He might rarely visit, perhaps living in a manor house or castle several miles away. Yet his presence was still felt. The fields were worked under his authority. Certain taxes would be paid to him. Certain duties were expected in return. Above the lord stood even greater nobles. Above them, a king. And above everyone, God. This order seemed as natural to medieval people as rivers flowing downhill or leaves falling in autumn. Few questioned it. It had simply always been this way. For many ordinary villagers, the idea of changing one's place in society felt almost as unlikely as changing the course of the stars. And yet, within those limits, people still found pride. A farmer hoped to grow healthy crops. A mason hoped his stone walls would stand for generations. A cooper hoped every barrel would hold water without leaking. Success was measured differently than it often is today. Not by fame, not by wealth beyond imagining, but by honest work. Healthy children. A full granary before winter. Enough firewood stacked neatly beside the cottage. Peace within the family. These were achievements worth celebrating. Perhaps that is why village festivals felt so joyful. After months of patient labor, neighbors gathered together to share food, music, dancing, and laughter. Not because life was easy, but because they understood exactly how precious these peaceful moments truly were. Their happiness often grew from simple things. The first warm day after a long winter. A successful harvest. The birth of a healthy child. The ringing of church bells on a bright Sunday morning. A loaf of fresh bread still warm from the oven. A familiar face returning safely from a nearby market town. Small blessings became great treasures. Of course, life could change without warning. A poor harvest. An illness. A harsh winter. A fire. Any one of these could alter the course of a family's future almost overnight. There were no insurance companies. No emergency savings accounts. No government programs waiting to offer assistance. Instead, people relied upon one another. Neighbors shared what little they could. Families worked together. Communities endured hardship side by side. Perhaps this was one of the greatest strengths of medieval village life. When survival depended upon cooperation, kindness became more than a virtue. It became a necessity. As the years slowly pass, you begin learning the work your parents know so well. Your hands grow stronger. Your steps become surer. The fields that once seemed endless now feel comfortably familiar. The same church bell still echoes across the valley. The same winding path still leads to the mill. The same seasons quietly return, each bringing its own work, its own beauty, and its own challenges. Your life may never carry you beyond these gentle hills. You may never see the great cities whose names travelers whisper beside the fire. You may never meet a king, or sail across a distant sea. But your story is no less important. It is the story lived by millions of ordinary people whose names history has mostly forgotten. They planted the fields, built the cottages, raised the families, mended the roads, baked the bread, and carried the medieval world upon their shoulders, one quiet day at a time. As evening settles over the village once again, the last golden light fades behind the hills. The cattle return from pasture. The smell of supper drifts gently through the cool air. Candles flicker inside tiny windows. Above them all, the stars begin their familiar journey across the night sky. Tomorrow will look very much like today. And for most people born in the Middle Ages, that was simply the way life was. As you close your eyes beside the warmth of the hearth, listening to the soft crackle of the fire and the peaceful breathing of those around you, remember this quiet truth. You did not choose the century into which you were born. But within that small corner of the world, surrounded by familiar faces and familiar fields, you would do what generations before you had always done. You would wake with the sun, work with steady hands, rest when darkness returned, and hope that tomorrow would be kind. Our journey, however, is only just beginning. Childhood wasn't much of a childhood. The seasons pass quietly. Almost before anyone notices, the tiny bundle wrapped beside the hearth has become a curious little child. You have learned to walk across the uneven floor of your family's cottage. You know where the warmest place beside the fire is during winter. You have discovered that chickens are far more interesting than they first appear, and that following them around the yard is an adventure all its own. The world still feels wonderfully large. A patch of wildflowers beside the footpath becomes a kingdom. A smooth stone found near the river is a treasured possession. A fallen branch becomes a mighty sword. Or perhaps a shepherd's staff. Or simply something to drag through the soft earth as you wander home. Children have always imagined great adventures. That has never changed. Long before toys filled shop shelves or games lived inside glowing screens, imagination supplied everything a child could ever need. A stick could become almost anything. A handful of pebbles could fill an afternoon. The changing clouds overhead might become castles, dragons, or great sailing ships drifting across an endless blue sea. For a little while, childhood looks much the same as it does today. There is laughter. There is curiosity. There are scraped knees, muddy feet, and endless questions about the world. Your parents smile as they watch you explore. Grandparents tell stories beside the evening fire. Older brothers and sisters patiently or sometimes not so patiently teach you games they learned when they were your age. But in the Middle Ages, childhood moves quickly. Very quickly. There is no clear moment when someone announces that playtime has ended. No ceremony. No birthday that suddenly changes everything. Instead, little by little, work quietly enters your life. At first, the tasks are so small that they hardly feel like work at all. Your mother asks you to gather a few eggs from beneath the hens. You proudly carry them home, concentrating with all your might not to drop a single one. Your father lets you carry a small bundle of kindling from the edge of the woods. It is lighter than the bundles he carries, but it feels wonderfully important. Perhaps you fetch water from the village well, walking carefully so that as little as possible spills over the side of the bucket. Perhaps you scatter grain for the chickens or help chase a wandering goose back through the gate. These are not punishments. They are simply part of growing up. Every pair of hands, no matter how small, can help in some way. And in a world where every harvest matters, every loaf of bread counts, and every winter must be carefully prepared for, even the smallest contribution has value. As the years pass, your responsibilities quietly grow. The little bucket becomes a larger one. The tiny bundle of sticks becomes an armful. Soon you are helping watch younger brothers and sisters while the adults work in the fields. You learn which berries are safe to gather, which mushrooms should be left alone, which paths through the forest are easiest after heavy rain. There are lessons everywhere. None are written on parchment. All are learned by watching. Watching your mother knead bread until the dough feels just right. Watching your father judge the weather simply by looking at the clouds drifting over the hills. Watching your grandparents repair tools that seem far older than you are. In the medieval world, education begins with observation. Children become skilled because they see the same work repeated every day, season after season, year after year. The village itself becomes a classroom. The fields teach patience. The forest teaches caution. The river teaches respect. Even the changing weather offers quiet lessons to those willing to notice. Of course, children still find time to play. No amount of work can entirely erase the joy of being young. On warm summer evenings, after the day's chores are finished, groups of children race across open fields, laughing as the last sunlight stretches long shadows across the grass. They climb low branches, skip stones across quiet streams, and invent games with whatever the countryside provides. Sometimes they chase one another through the hay after the harvest. Sometimes they simply lie on their backs, watching birds circle lazily overhead. These moments are precious. Not because they are rare, but because they fit gently between the rhythms of everyday life. No one expects childhood to last forever. In fact, most adults hardly think of childhood as a separate stage of life at all. To them, growing older means gradually joining the work that keeps the family alive. And so, without anyone saying a word, you slowly become less of a child and more of a helper. Your hands grow stronger. Your steps become steadier. The tasks that once seemed difficult now feel almost effortless. The adults begin to trust you with more responsibility. Not because they wish to burden you, but because they know you are capable. As evening settles once more over the village, the day's work comes to an end. The animals are safely penned. The fire burns warmly once again. You sit beside your family, tired in the pleasant way that follows an honest day's effort. Outside, the stars quietly appear above the fields. Tomorrow will bring new chores. Perhaps a little more play. And, without you even noticing, another small step toward adulthood. School? Probably not. Another year slips quietly by. The seasons continue their familiar dance. Spring awakens the fields with fresh green shoots. Summer fills the air with a steady hum of bees. Autumn brings wagons heavy with grain. Winter settles gently over the rooftops, inviting everyone back toward the warmth of the hearth. By now, you have become an important part of your family's daily life. You know how to feed the chickens before breakfast. You can carry water without spilling very much. You know which cow enjoys wandering farther than the others and which old sheep always seems determined to squeeze through the fence. Each day teaches you something new. Not through books, but through living. If someone from the modern world were to ask whether you went to school, the question might seem rather unusual. School, as we think of it today, simply was not part of everyday life for most medieval children. There were certainly places of learning. Monasteries carefully preserved books copied by hand. Cathedral schools taught boys who might one day become priests or serve in important positions. Some wealthy families hired tutors to educate their children. And in growing towns, a few schools offered instruction in reading, writing, and arithmetic. But these opportunities were rare, especially if you lived in a small farming village. For ordinary families, survival came first. There were fields to tend, animals to care for, wood to gather, bread to bake, roofs to repair before winter arrived. Every member of the household had a role to play. Spending years away from those responsibilities simply was not possible for most children. So your education happened somewhere else. It happens every morning, every afternoon, every season. Your classroom has no walls. Its roof is the open sky. Your teachers are your parents, your grandparents, your neighbors, and the land itself. You learn by watching. When your mother spins wool into thread, you sit nearby, your small fingers trying to copy her careful movements. At first the thread breaks. Again and again. She smiles. Shows you once more. Eventually, your hands begin to understand. Your father sharpens a farming tool before sunrise. You notice how patiently he works. Never rushing. Always checking the edge with his thumb. One day he lets you try. The blade is dull when you finish. Not quite right. But tomorrow you will do a little better. And the day after that, better still. Knowledge grows slowly, like an oak tree. One careful season at a time. Sometimes an elderly neighbor tells stories while repairing fishing nets. The stories are entertaining, but hidden inside them are lessons. How to read the weather. How to avoid dangerous marshes. How to recognize the call of certain birds. How to know when spring has truly arrived. No one announces that today's lesson is about nature. The lesson simply becomes part of the conversation. Children absorb it almost without realizing. Memory is one of your greatest tools. Books are precious. Very precious. Each one has been copied by hand, letter after letter, by patient scribes whose work may have taken months or even years. A single book is worth more than many families could ever hope to own. Most village children will never hold one. Never turn its pages. Never smell the fresh ink drying upon fine parchment. Instead, information lives inside people. Recipes, prayers, songs, family histories, planting calendars, healing remedies. All are carried from one generation to the next through careful repetition. This is why stories matter so much. An evening beside the fire is not simply entertainment. It is education. Grandparents remember events from long ago. Parents repeat the wisdom their own parents shared. Children listen. Not because they are growing up fast. The years continue their quiet journey. One by one, the seasons pass beneath the same familiar sky. The oak tree at the edge of the village grows a little taller. The little stream continues its endless song. The church bell still echoes across the valley each morning, just as it did before you were born. You are no longer the smallest child running through the fields. Your footsteps have grown steadier. Your hands have grown stronger. Without ever noticing exactly when it happened, people have begun to treat you a little differently. The neighbors now greet you with the same quiet respect they offer the adults. When work needs doing, they expect you to help. When younger children wander too close to the river, they trust you to guide them safely home. Growing older happens so gradually that no one can point to the exact day it begins. And yet, childhood seems to drift away as gently as morning mist beneath the rising sun. In the medieval world, there was little space between being a child and becoming useful. Life itself encouraged you to mature quickly. Not through harsh lessons alone, but through simple necessity. One of the first things you begin to understand is that illness is an ordinary visitor. In our own time, a cough often means little more than a few days of rest. A fever may send us to a doctor who offers medicine and reassurance. But here, in your quiet village, every illness carries a question no one can answer. Will this pass? Or will it grow worse? The villagers know many remedies. A warm broth prepared with herbs from the garden. Honey stirred into soothing drinks. Poultices made from carefully gathered plants. Cool cloths placed gently upon a warm forehead. Sometimes these treatments help. Sometimes the body heals on its own. And sometimes, despite everyone's greatest hopes, it does not. As a child, you do not fully understand why certain cottages remain strangely quiet. Why church bells ring on unexpected afternoons. Why adults lower their voices when speaking of a neighbor who will not be returning home. Death is not hidden away. It is part of village life. When someone passes, the entire community feels the loss. Neighbors gather to help the family. Meals are shared. Prayers are offered. Stories are remembered. Children, too, witness these moments. Not because anyone wishes to burden them, but because there is simply no way to separate life from death. Both belong to the same village, the same fields, the same families. It may sound sad to modern ears, yet something gentle grows from this closeness. People learn not to take one another for granted. A shared meal becomes precious. An evening of laughter beside the fire becomes a gift. A healthy harvest feels worthy of celebration. When life is uncertain, ordinary days become extraordinary. Perhaps that is why medieval festivals shine so brightly in history. After weeks of hard work, the village gathers together. Musicians play lively tunes on simple instruments. Children chase one another across the village green. Fresh bread is shared. Stories grow taller with every telling. For a little while, everyone simply enjoys being together. Joy, after all, is never less meaningful because life is difficult. Sometimes, it becomes even more meaningful. As you continue growing, your body slowly adapts to the work around you. You rise with the sun almost without thinking. You know how to carry heavy bundles without tiring too quickly. You recognize the scent of rain before the clouds fully arrive. You can tell one sheep from another. You understand which tools belong to which jobs. These skills become so familiar that you hardly notice them. childhood has quietly transformed into experience. There are no certificates to mark your progress. No formal graduation. One day, someone simply hands you a task that was once reserved for an older brother or sister. And everyone assumes you know how to do it. Because you do. The village has been teaching you all along. You have also begun to understand something else. Life does not always unfold according to our wishes. Some years the harvest is plentiful. Other years heavy rain flattens the grain before it can be gathered. A cow may fall ill. A storm may damage the roof. A bitter frost may arrive earlier than expected. The villagers cannot control these things. Instead, they learn something quieter. Resilience. When one field produces poorly, another may still provide enough. When one family struggles, neighbors often lend a hand. When a roof loses its thatch, friends gather to repair it together. No one becomes strong entirely alone. Community is not merely pleasant. It is essential. As the years continue, the faces around you begin to change. A younger cousin is born. A respected elder grows slower with each passing season. The children who once played beside you are now working in neighboring fields. Time moves gently, but it never stands still. One evening, after another long day's work, you sit outside your family's cottage. The air is cool. The scent of fresh hay drifts across the valley. Above you, countless stars appear one by one, just as they have for thousands of years. There is no hurry. Only quiet. Only the comforting sounds of crickets hidden among the grass and the distant hoot of an owl beginning its nightly rounds. You think about tomorrow's work. There will be fences to mend. Perhaps grain to gather. Perhaps sheep to move into a different pasture. The tasks no longer seem difficult. They have become part of who you are. Looking back, your childhood feels both near and far. There were games played beside the stream. Wildflowers gathered for no particular reason. Long afternoons chasing butterflies through the meadow. Those memories remain warm and bright. But they now sit gently beside newer memories. Of responsibility. Of patience. Of learning how every small effort helps the people you love. And perhaps that is the quiet truth of growing up in the Middle Ages. Childhood was never entirely lost. It simply blended, little by little, into the work of everyday life. There were still moments of wonder. Still evenings filled with laughter. Still stories shared beside the fire. But from an early age, every child understood that they belonged to something larger than themselves. A family. A village. A way of life that had endured for generations. As the fire inside your cottage begins to glow warmly against the gathering darkness, you step inside. The wooden door closes softly behind you. Tomorrow, another ordinary day awaits. And with each sunrise, you move a little farther from childhood. And a little closer to the life that destiny has quietly prepared for you. The journey through the Middle Ages has only just begun. Food, mostly bread, sometimes hope. Morning arrives with the comforting scent of warm bread. Not sweet bread filled with butter and sugar, nor the soft loaves stacked neatly on the shelves of a modern bakery. This is a simpler bread. A darker bread. A loaf that has become the quiet companion of nearly every meal your family will eat. As the first light spreads across the village, your mother kneels beside the oven she and countless generations before her have relied upon. The fire has been carefully tended through the night. Dry wood crackles softly, filling the cottage with gentle warmth while smoke drifts lazily upward toward the small opening in the roof. The dough has been rising since before dawn. Made from grain grown in nearby fields. Ground into flour at the village mill. mixed patiently with water and a little salt. Nothing more. There are no packets of yeast waiting in a cupboard. No electric mixers. No timers gently counting the minutes. Everything depends upon experience. A practiced eye, patient hands, and years of quiet habit. Bread is not simply food. It is life itself. If your family has bread, there is comfort. If the bread stores begin to grow smaller as winter stretches on, everyone notices. You soon discover that nearly every meal begins with it. Sometimes the bread is fresh and pleasantly warm. Sometimes it is several days old and has grown hard enough that it must be softened in soup or broth before anyone can comfortably eat it. Nothing is wasted. Not even the smallest crust. Every crumb has value. As you take your place beside the simple wooden table, breakfast is waiting. A small bowl of porridge sends gentle curls of steam into the cool morning air. Made from oats or barley, it is thick, filling, and wonderfully dependable. Its taste is plain. But plain food has a quiet advantage. It fills empty stomachs. It gives strength for the long hours ahead. Your family eats slowly. No one is rushing. The work of the day will soon begin, but meals are moments to pause together. The youngest children receive their bowls first. The older family members quietly pass bread from one pair of hands to another. Outside, the village is waking. You can hear the distant rhythm of an axe splitting firewood. A cart creaks slowly along the muddy road. Somewhere beyond the fields, cows call softly to one another as they wait to be milked. It is a peaceful beginning to another ordinary day. As the seasons pass, you begin to notice that your meals change very little. Today's breakfast looks much like yesterday's. Tomorrow's will likely be much the same. Modern kitchens offer choices from every corner of the world. Fresh fruit in winter. Spices from distant countries. Coffee from tropical mountains. Chocolate from forests across the ocean. But your medieval table depends almost entirely upon what grows nearby. The village provides what it can. The fields provide the grain. The garden offers onions, cabbages, beans, peas, and herbs. The orchard gives apples when autumn arrives. The hens provide eggs when they are willing. The cows offer milk. Everything has its season. When strawberries ripen, everyone enjoys them while they last. When autumn apples are gathered, they are carefully stored for the colder months ahead. Nothing appears simply because someone wishes for it. Nature quietly decides the menu. And the villagers accept her decisions with remarkable patience. Occasionally, supper becomes something especially welcome. A pot of vegetable stew bubbles gently above the fire. Carrots, leeks, turnips, perhaps a handful of beans, all slowly cooking together until their flavors become one. The aroma fills the cottage, wrapping everyone in a feeling of warmth before the first spoonful is even tasted. On fortunate days, a little cheese accompanies the meal. Perhaps a few eggs. Sometimes fish if the nearby river has been generous. Meat. That is something different. Many people today imagine medieval feasts overflowing with roasted meats. For ordinary villagers, however, meat is a guest that visits only from time to time. A chicken may be kept for its eggs rather than eaten. A cow is far more valuable alive, providing milk season after season. Pigs are often raised carefully, becoming an important source of food when colder weather approaches. When meat does appear on the table, it is appreciated with quiet gratitude. Every bite is savored. Nothing is wasted. Bones flavor soups. Fat is carefully saved. Even the smallest pieces find a purpose. The medieval kitchen understands something modern households sometimes forget. Food is precious. Every loaf begins as a seed. Every bowl of porridge represents months of work. Every vegetable has survived changing weather, hungry insects, and uncertain seasons before finally reaching the table. Because of this, meals carry a gentle sense of thankfulness. Not spoken loudly. Simply understood. As evening settles over the valley once again, your family gathers beside the fire. The day's work has left everyone pleasantly tired. The wooden bowls are passed around. Bread is broken by hand. The stew is simple. The conversation is quiet. Someone tells a familiar story. A younger child laughs. The flames dance softly across the walls of the cottage. Outside, darkness slowly covers the fields where tomorrow's meals are already beginning to grow. The wheat bends gently beneath the evening breeze. The vegetables rest beneath the cooling earth. The orchard stands peacefully beneath the stars. There is comfort in knowing where your food comes from. You have watched it grow. You have helped gather it. You have carried it home with your own hands. It may not be a table filled with endless choices. It may not be rich or extravagant. But as you finish the last spoonful of warm porridge and place another small piece of bread into the glowing firelight, you understand something that every medieval family quietly knew. A simple meal, shared together after an honest day's work, could feel like one of life's greatest blessings. Tomorrow, the fields will call once more. And with them, the slow, patient work of filling tomorrow's table. Famine is always nearby. The evening fades gently into night. The last bowls have been washed with cool water from the bucket beside the door, and the fire has settled into a bed of glowing embers. Outside, the village grows wonderfully quiet. A soft breeze stirs the branches of the old oak near the well, while somewhere beyond the fields an owl begins its patient conversation with the darkness. You lie beneath a simple wool blanket. The scent of fresh bread still lingers in the cottage, mingling with wood smoke and drying herbs hanging from the rafters. Your stomach is comfortably full. Not overflowing. Simply content. In the medieval world, that quiet feeling is never taken for granted. As sleep slowly finds you, the seasons continue their endless journey. Spring arrives once more, almost unnoticed. The snow melts into tiny streams that weave through the meadows. Morning birds return to the hedgerows, singing melodies that seem unchanged from one year to the next. The bare branches of winter dress themselves in tender green leaves, and the fields, silent for so many months, awaken beneath the warming sun. Your family steps outside together. There is much to do. The earth has rested long enough. Now it asks for patient hands. Your father carries a sack of carefully saved grain. Not grain for eating. These precious kernels have another purpose. They are tomorrow's bread, entrusted to the soil. You walk beside him, carrying a small wooden basket. Every so often he reaches inside, takes a handful of seed, and scatters it with a slow, practiced motion. The tiny grains disappear into the dark earth almost without a sound. It seems almost impossible that something so small could become enough to feed a family. Yet this quiet miracle has unfolded for countless generations. Every loaf begins here. Not in the oven, but in the field. The village moves with remarkable harmony during these spring weeks. Neighbors help one another mend broken fences. Oxen pull wooden plows through the damp soil. Children chase away curious birds eager for an easy meal. The air carries the cheerful sounds of work, though no one seems hurried. Everyone understands that nature keeps her own schedule. No amount of rushing will persuade the wheat to grow faster. So people wait. Patiently. The rains arrive. The sun follows. Little by little, the green shoots become taller. By early summer, gentle waves of grain ripple across the countryside whenever the wind passes over them. Standing at the edge of the field, you could almost believe the earth itself is breathing. Years like these are remembered with quiet smiles. The harvest fills the granary. The baker has enough flour. The mill wheel turns steadily beside the stream. Children fall asleep each night knowing there will be bread in the morning. There is a peaceful confidence that settles over the village. Not excitement. Not celebration. Simply relief. But life in the Middle Ages has taught everyone a lesson that needs no words. No harvest is ever promised. One summer, the sky changes. The first few days of rain are welcomed. The thirsty fields drink deeply, and the villagers are grateful. But the rain does not stop. Clouds gather again the next morning. And the morning after that. The narrow footpaths become ribbons of mud. Water collects between the rows of young wheat, refusing to drain away. Boots grow heavy with wet earth, and the familiar songs of birds become strangely quiet beneath the endless grey sky. Each evening, your father walks to the fields. He says very little. He kneels, lifts a handful of soil, and lets it fall slowly through his fingers. The ground is too wet. The grain cannot breathe. The villagers do what they can. They wait for sunshine. They whisper hopeful prayers during the Sunday service. They look toward the horizon each morning, searching for a patch of blue. Eventually the rain passes. But it has stayed too long. Some of the wheat has bent beneath its own weight. Some has begun to spoil before it can fully ripen. The harvest still comes. Only smaller than anyone had hoped. No one speaks of famine. Not yet. Instead, life changes in almost invisible ways. Your mother slices each loaf a little thinner. The pot of stew welcomes a little more water. The onions from the garden are stretched over several meals instead of one. Nothing feels dramatic. Only quieter. More careful. As autumn settles across the valley, the leaves turn to shades of amber and gold. It is a beautiful season, perhaps the most beautiful of all. Yet beauty does not always mean abundance. Inside the cottage, your parents count their stores. Sacks of grain stand neatly against the wall. Bundles of dried herbs hang overhead. Strings of onions rest beside carefully stored apples. Everything has its place. Everything has been earned through months of steady work. The question is simple. Will it be enough? Winter has a curious way of making food disappear. Not all at once. But one loaf. One bowl. One handful at a time. The first snowfall arrives almost silently. The village looks peaceful beneath its blanket of white. Smoke curls gently from every chimney. Children laugh as they leave footprints in the fresh snow before being called back inside. The world seems wrapped in quiet. Around the evening fire, your family continues its familiar routine. Bread. Porridge. A little cheese. Perhaps a few dried beans added to the soup. Simple meals become slower meals. Every bite is appreciated. No crumb is left behind. You begin to notice something remarkable. Even during uncertain times, the village does not face hardship alone. An elderly widow finds a loaf waiting outside her door. A family whose cow has given more milk than expected quietly shares it with their neighbors. The miller allows a farmer to grind grain now, trusting that payment will come after a better harvest. No one keeps careful records of these kindnesses. They are simply understood. Because 1 year of hardship for one family may become another family's hardship the following year. Generosity is not an extraordinary act here. It is part of surviving together. As the long winter slowly loosens its grip, tiny signs of spring begin to appear once again. The snow retreats into the shadows. The streams begin to sing more loudly. Small green shoots emerge from the earth with gentle determination. Life, it seems, is always willing to begin again. One morning, your father lifts the small sack of seed that has been carefully protected all winter. There is less than last year, but there is enough. He smiles not because he knows the harvest will be plentiful, but because hope has never depended upon certainty. Together you walk toward the waiting fields. The morning sun rests warmly upon your shoulders. Birdsong fills the cool air. And one by one, the first seeds of another year disappear into the welcoming earth. In the medieval world, every harvest begins with faith. And every meal begins with hope. A drink, a hearth, and the quiet wisdom of the table. Another spring slowly becomes summer. The fields, which only weeks ago held nothing but neat rows of hopeful seeds, now sway gently beneath a warm afternoon breeze. From the doorway of your cottage, you watch the wheat move like golden water beneath the sun, each wave following the last in a peaceful rhythm that never seems to end. The village has found its familiar pace once again. Morning begins with birdsong drifting through the open doorway. The fire is coaxed gently back to life after the night's rest. Someone kneads dough upon the worn wooden table. Someone else walks toward the well with empty buckets that will soon return full. Life is ordinary once more. And after the uncertainty of a poor harvest, ordinary feels like a gift. By now, you have learned that food is only one part of every meal. Water, too, is essential. Yet in your village, water is treated with quiet respect. The stream that winds its way through the valley is beautiful. Children love to watch tiny fish dart between smooth stones. The cattle often drink from its gentle current. Women kneel along its banks to wash clothing. Wagons sometimes pass through its shallow crossings, leaving the water clouded for a little while before it slowly clears again. The stream belongs to everyone. And because it belongs to everyone, it gathers a little of everyone's life. No one fully understands the tiny things that cannot be seen. The invisible creatures that modern science would one day reveal remain entirely unknown. The villagers simply know that, from time to time, someone falls ill after drinking from water that seemed perfectly clear. There is no mystery to solve. Only another uncertainty to accept. So over many generations, families have discovered quiet habits that help them endure. Whenever possible, water is drawn from wells that are carefully tended. Fresh spring water, when it can be found, is treasured. Rainwater is collected during gentle showers, stored in barrels for later use. And inside almost every cottage, another familiar ritual unfolds beside the fire. A great iron pot hangs above the glowing embers. Sometimes it holds a stew. Sometimes porridge. And very often, it simply holds water. The water is gently heated before being used in cooking. Herbs gathered from nearby hedgerows may be added for their pleasant fragrance. Mint, chamomile, sage. Sometimes a handful of leaves whose names have been spoken in the village for generations. Whether they heal the body or simply comfort the spirit hardly matters. Their warmth is welcome all the same. For many adults, there is another familiar drink. A light ale, brewed patiently within the village itself. To modern ears, the thought may seem surprising. But this ale is not like the strong drink served in busy taverns centuries later. It is gentle, mild, made from grain already growing in the surrounding fields. The brewing process often made it a dependable everyday drink when water quality was uncertain. Even so, it is enjoyed with moderation. It is simply another part of daily life. No more remarkable than bread cooling upon the windowsill. No one hurries through a meal. There is little reason to. The fields have taught everyone that worthwhile things require patience. Bread must rise before it is baked. Cheese must age before it is ready. Apples sweeten only after their long summer upon the tree. Even soup tastes better after quietly simmering beside the fire for many hours. The table itself becomes a place where time seems to slow. You notice the conversations. Not loud discussions. Just gentle voices sharing the ordinary events of the day. Someone speaks of a calf born that morning. Another remembers seeing the first swallows returning from the south. A neighbor mentions that wild strawberries are beginning to appear along the woodland path. The smallest moments become worthy of notice. Perhaps this is because life offers no endless stream of distractions. There are no newspapers arriving every hour. No glowing screens asking for attention. The people around the table become the evening's greatest company. Stories are told once again. Not because everyone has forgotten them, but because familiar stories become old friends. Children know exactly which parts make their grandparents smile. The adults laugh softly before the ending even arrives. And somehow, hearing the tale one more time feels just as comforting as the first. You begin to understand that the meal itself is doing more than easing hunger. It is gathering the family together. No matter how long the day's work has been. No matter whether the harvest has been generous or disappointing. For a little while, everyone sits beneath the same roof. Everyone shares the same loaf. Everyone rests. Outside, twilight settles across the valley. The fields grow still beneath the fading light. The mill wheel, which turned faithfully throughout the day, slows as evening deepens. The chickens settle quietly upon their roosts. Smoke rises gently into a sky painted with soft shades of lavender and gold. Tomorrow's work can wait until sunrise. There is peace in that thought. As the weeks become months, you realize something else about food. It has taught you patience. It has taught you gratitude. It has taught you to notice the quiet miracles that happen every single day. A seed becoming wheat. Wheat becoming flour. Flour becoming bread. Bread becoming strength enough to work another day. Nothing happens quickly. Everything depends upon care. Perhaps that is why your family never begins a meal carelessly. Each loaf represents months of unseen labor. Each bowl of soup carries the memory of countless mornings spent in the fields. Each sip of warm broth reminds everyone that another day has been gently carried to its end. The fire burns lower now. One by one, the wooden bowls are stacked upon the table. Your mother covers tomorrow's dough with a clean linen cloth. Your father quietly checks that the cottage door is secure before adding one last piece of wood to the hearth. Outside, the stars begin appearing above the sleeping village. The same stars that watched over your birth. The same stars that watched the wheat grow through spring and summer. The same stars that will shine upon tomorrow's harvest, whatever it may bring. You settle beneath your blanket once more. The comforting scent of bread still lingers in the air. The crackling fire grows softer with every passing moment. Your eyes become heavy. Your breathing slows. Beyond the cottage walls, the village sleeps peacefully beneath the quiet night. And as another season gently turns its page, your own life begins to change with it. The hands that once carried only small baskets are growing stronger. The tasks that once belonged to others will soon become your own. For in the morning, the fields will still be waiting. And with them, the long, steady work that shapes not only your days, but the course of your entire life. That, however, is a story for another evening. For tomorrow, with the first light touching the meadow and the church bell greeting the dawn, you will begin to discover that food alone does not sustain a medieval life. It is work quiet, constant, and shared that fills the table in every season. And so, as the embers fade into a gentle crimson glow, our journey carries us softly onward, toward the fields where your true labor is about to begin. Your house is cold, smoky, and full of surprises. The last of the evening's warmth lingers in the hearth. Only a few glowing embers remain, breathing softly beneath a blanket of pale ash. Around you, your family has settled into sleep. The cottage is quiet except for the occasional crackle of the fire and the gentle sigh of the wind as it brushes across the thatched roof. Beyond the walls, the fields rest beneath a sky crowded with stars. Those same fields have filled your family's table through another season. They have asked much of your hands, and little by little you have grown strong enough to answer. The baskets you carry are heavier now. The mornings begin earlier than they once did. The work no longer feels unfamiliar. It simply feels like life. You close your eyes to the steady rhythm of the fire. And before long, morning arrives once again. The village does not awaken all at once. It stirs gently. A rooster calls somewhere beyond the cottages. A dog stretches beside a doorway. Thin ribbons of smoke begin climbing lazily into the cool dawn air as families coax yesterday's embers back into living flames. Your father is already awake. Without a word, he kneels beside the hearth, placing a few dry twigs across the glowing coals. He waits patiently. There is no hurry. Soon a small flame appears. It flickers. It grows. Before long, the cottage is wrapped once more in its familiar warmth. You have watched this simple ritual every morning for as long as you can remember. No one thinks of it as remarkable. Yet without this fire, the day could scarcely begin. It warms the porridge. It dries damp boots after rain. It softens cold hands returning from the fields. It lights the room long after the sun has disappeared beyond the hills. The hearth is not merely part of the house. In many ways, it is the house. As the fire brightens, the rest of the cottage slowly comes into view. You know every corner without needing to look. The sturdy table where your family shares each meal. The wooden bench polished smooth by generations of use. The heavy chest tucked against the wall, holding the few belongings too precious to leave lying about. Above your head, bundles of herbs sway gently from the rafters. Sage, thyme, mint. When the warmth of the fire reaches them, they fill the room with a quiet fragrance that has come to mean home. The walls themselves seem to carry memories. Strong oak beams support the roof, their surfaces darkened by years of wood smoke. Between them, woven branches are covered with clay and straw, carefully repaired whenever tiny cracks appear after a hard winter or a heavy storm. Nothing here is new, but everything has been cared for. Every repair tells the story of hands that refuse to let their home fall into ruin. Above you, the thick thatched roof keeps away the rain remarkably well. When showers pass overhead, the sound is soft rather than harsh. 1,000 tiny drops whisper across the straw until the clouds move on and the sun returns once more. On evenings like those, listening to the rain becomes its own quiet comfort. The doorway is low, built to keep warmth inside during the colder months. Each member of the family has learned, almost without thinking, to lower their head slightly while stepping through it. Small habits become second nature, just as surely as the changing seasons. The cottage is only one room. At dawn it becomes a kitchen. By midday it serves as a workshop where clothes are mended, baskets repaired, and tools carefully maintained. At supper it becomes a dining room. And when darkness settles across the valley, Blankets are spread, benches are moved aside, and it quietly becomes a place of sleep. The room changes with the hours, never complaining, always ready for whatever the day requires. Luxury is found not in having many rooms, but in making one room serve many purposes. As the morning unfolds, sunlight slips through the small window, catching tiny specks of dust that drift lazily through the warm air. Outside, you hear familiar sounds. The creak of a cart rolling toward the mill. The rhythmic tapping of a blacksmith beginning another day's work. Children laughing as they carry buckets much too large for them, determined to help in whatever way they can. These sounds weave together like threads in a well-made cloth. Each one belongs. Each one tells you that the village is awake. Before leaving for the fields, your mother straightens the blankets and folds them neatly into the corner of the room. Nothing is left untidy for long. Every bowl is washed. Every tool is returned to its place. A home with few possessions depends upon caring well for each one. A cracked bowl is mended if it can be. A torn tunic receives another careful patch. A loose stool is tightened rather than discarded. Things are expected to last. And because they last, they quietly become part of the family's story. As you step outside, you pause for a moment beside the doorway. Turning back, you look at the little cottage resting peacefully beneath its golden roof of straw. It is not grand. Travelers from distant cities might pass without giving it a second glance. But within these humble walls you have learned to walk. You have listened to stories beside the fire. You have shared every loaf of bread, every winter evening, every celebration, and every sorrow. The cottage has sheltered each memory without asking for anything in return. It feels solid, safe, almost timeless. Yet every home has its little secrets. The warmth of the hearth invites more than just your family. The thatched roof offers shelter to more than human hands. And when the sun sets once again, you will begin to notice that you share this quiet home with many other small lives, each finding comfort beneath the very same roof. But those unexpected housemates can wait until tomorrow evening's story. The quiet housemates beneath the roof. Evening returns with its familiar gentleness. The sun slips behind the distant hills, leaving the valley bathed in soft shades of amber and violet. One by one, the sounds of the day's work begin to fade. The blacksmith's hammer falls silent. The shepherd guides the last of his flock through the village lane. Smoke rises peacefully from every chimney, carrying with it the comforting scent of burning oak and freshly baked bread. You walk home with your family. The cottage waits just as you left it that morning. The wooden door opens with its familiar creak. Warm air greets you before anyone speaks a word. Your mother places another piece of wood upon the hearth, and soon the fire fills the room with a gentle orange glow. Shadows dance across the smoke-darkened beams overhead, moving slowly as though they, too, have grown tired after a long day's work. You settle onto the wooden bench while supper quietly simmers above the fire. Outside, darkness gathers across the fields. Inside, everything feels safe. The little cottage seems to wrap itself around your family like a warm wool blanket against the cool evening air. It is easy to believe that this small home belongs entirely to you. But over the years, you begin to notice small signs that suggest otherwise. At first, they are almost too subtle to see. A faint rustling somewhere above your head after everyone has gone to bed. A tiny shower of straw drifting down from the thatched roof. The quick patter of little feet disappearing the moment the fire grows brighter. No one seems surprised. Your father barely looks up from mending a basket. Your mother smiles softly as she brushes a few pieces of straw from the table. It has always been this way. The roof that shelters your family also offers shelter to tiny birds seeking a safe place for the night. In spring, sparrows often tuck themselves into the warm spaces beneath the thatch, filling the early mornings with cheerful songs long before the rooster remembers his own duty. You wake to their gentle chorus so often that silence would feel far stranger. Sometimes, a swallow chooses the sheltered beam above the doorway for its nest. Week after week, you watch the little birds come and go, carrying tiny twigs, soft feathers, and bits of dry grass with remarkable determination. Soon, quiet chirping fills the cottage whenever the parents return with insects gathered from the fields. Your younger brothers and sisters look upward with wide eyes. No one disturbs the nest. The birds, after all, are simply raising their family beneath the same roof where yours is growing. As summer gives way to autumn, other visitors quietly appear. Tiny field mice, having spent the warmer months among the grasses, begin searching for somewhere dry before the first frosts arrive. The scent of stored grain is impossible for them to ignore. You might glimpse one for only a heartbeat. A small grey shape slipping behind the heavy chest before vanishing into the shadows. It seems almost shy. More frightened of you than you are of it. Your family has grown accustomed to these little guests. Food is stored carefully. Sacks are tied tightly. Wooden chests are closed each evening before bedtime. The village cats, proud of their important work, wander patiently from cottage to cottage, always alert for the smallest movement beneath a bench or beside a grain sack. One sleepy cat spends many afternoons stretched comfortably beside your hearth. At first glance, it appears to be doing nothing at all. Yet every so often, one ear twitches. One eye opens. It has not forgotten its purpose. The cat understands the quiet balance of cottage life as well as anyone. As the colder months arrive, the fire becomes even more precious. Everyone gathers close around its steady warmth. The walls hold back the bitter wind, but they cannot keep out every breath of winter. Small drafts slip through the timbers. The windows grow pale with frost on quiet mornings. Blankets are pulled a little tighter before sleep. Still, compared with the cold waiting outside, the cottage feels wonderfully welcoming. The warmth draws many living creatures toward it. Not all of them are easily noticed. Tiny insects find hiding places among the straw used for bedding. Others settle quietly within cracks in the old wooden beams. The villagers do not speak of them with frustration. They simply accept them as another small part of life, much like rain in autumn or mud in spring. Each season brings its own companions. Each asks for a little patience. Every few weeks, fresh straw is spread across the sleeping places. The old straw is carried outside, returning at last to the earth from which it first grew. The cottage is swept carefully. Blankets are shaken in the fresh morning air. Windows are opened whenever the weather allows, inviting sunlight to wander through the room. Your mother believes that a bright cottage lifts the spirits. Whether she learned that from her own mother, or discovered it herself over many years, you cannot say. You simply know that on sunny mornings the house seems happier somehow. The light catches the bundles of herbs hanging from the rafters. The polished wooden bowls gleam softly upon the table. Even the smoke-darkened walls seem warmer beneath the golden sunshine. As you grow older, you begin to understand something that no one ever explains aloud. A medieval home is never entirely separate from the natural world. The fields feed it. The forest warms it. The river serves it. The birds sing above it. The mice sometimes visit it. The changing seasons pass through it like quiet guests. There is no sharp line between indoors and outdoors. Only a gentle meeting of both. When the wind howls across the valley during a winter storm, you hear its voice through the roof. When spring rain falls, you smell the damp earth before stepping outside. When summer arrives, bees hum lazily near the open doorway while warm sunlight stretches across the floor. Your home breathes with the seasons. And perhaps that is why it feels so alive. The fire has burned low once again. Your family has finished the evening meal. Your father closes the wooden door with its familiar wooden latch. Outside, the stars begin to appear above the quiet village. Inside, everyone settles into their familiar places beneath wool blankets, listening to the comforting crackle of the hearth. The little cottage sighs softly as the timbers settle for the night. It has sheltered another ordinary day. Tomorrow, before the village stirs, you will wake once more beneath this humble roof. And as winter slowly deepens, you will discover that sharing a single room with the people you love brings its own quiet challenges. For when night falls, and every blanket is spread beside the fading fire, sleep itself becomes another small adventure. A night beneath the hearth. The cottage grows quieter with every passing moment. Outside, the last breeze of the evening slips gently across the sleeping fields, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and distant pine. Somewhere beyond the village, an owl calls once, then falls silent again. The stars continue their slow journey across the clear night sky, unnoticed by nearly everyone below. Inside your little home, the fire has settled into a bed of glowing embers. Its warm orange light reaches only a short distance before giving way to soft shadows that gather peacefully in the corners of the room. The day's work is over. There are no more fences to mend. No buckets left to carry. No grain waiting to be ground before morning. For a few precious hours, the village belongs to sleep. One by one, your family prepares for the night. The wooden bowls are stacked neatly upon the table. The iron pot is moved away from the hottest part of the fire, ready for tomorrow's breakfast. Your mother gently folds the linen cloth that covered the bread. Your father steps outside for one last quiet look across the fields before carefully closing the door against the cool night air. The familiar wooden latch falls softly into place. Now the cottage is wrapped in stillness. There are no bedrooms hidden behind closed doors. No long hallways lit by candles. Instead, the single room quietly transforms once again. Blankets are unfolded. Simple mattresses, filled with straw, are laid close to the hearth where the last warmth of the fire will linger through the night. You have slept here for as long as you can remember. The rustle of straw beneath the blankets is as familiar to you as birdsong at dawn. At first, the mattress feels a little uneven. A few stalks always seem determined to settle into curious places. But after a long day in the fields, your tired body hardly notices. Comfort, you have learned, is often measured less by softness and more by honest exhaustion. You lie beside your brothers and sisters, listening to the gentle rhythm of everyone settling into sleep. Someone whispers a final good night. Someone else quietly laughs at a story remembered from supper. Then, little by little, the voices disappear. Only the fire continues speaking. Its gentle crackle fills the silence without disturbing it. Every now and then, a tiny spark rises from the glowing embers before quietly fading away. You watch it for a moment. Then another. Soon your eyelids begin to grow heavy. Yet the cottage itself never seems entirely asleep. The old timbers creak softly as they cool after the warmth of the day. The wind brushes against the thatched roof with patient hands. Somewhere above, the sparrows tucked safely into their nests shift gently in their sleep. Even the faithful village cat, curled comfortably near the hearth, lifts its head from time to time before deciding that everything is exactly as it should be. These little sounds have become part of the night's music. Without them, the silence might feel strangely empty. On winter nights, the family sleeps close together. Not simply for companionship, but because warmth is easier to keep when shared. The fire gives what comfort it can, though by morning only a faint glow may remain beneath the ash. The thick stone of the hearth slowly releases the heat it gathered during the evening, making the space nearby the most welcoming place in the cottage. Those sleeping farther away pull their blankets a little tighter. No one complains. This is simply how winter has always been. Outside, frost quietly paints delicate patterns across the wooden shutters. The world beyond the walls becomes pale and silent beneath the moonlight. Inside, your breathing slows. The steady rhythm of your family's sleep fills the room with a sense of peace that no words could ever fully describe. You begin to understand that rest is not something earned only at the end of a difficult day. It is part of the rhythm that keeps the village alive. The fields rest through winter. The trees rest beneath snow. The river slows beneath thin sheets of ice. And each night, the people rest as well, gathering strength for another sunrise. As the years pass, the cottage itself seems to age alongside your family. A beam is replaced after a storm. Fresh thatch is added before another winter arrives. The table receives another careful repair where generations of hands have leaned upon its edge. Nothing remains exactly the same. Yet somehow, everything remains familiar. The house grows older with you. Its walls quietly witness birthdays, harvest celebrations, evenings of laughter, and moments of sorrow alike. If they could speak, they would tell stories stretching back long before your own first memories. Perhaps that is what makes a house become a home. Not its size, not the strength of its walls, but the countless ordinary moments held safely within them. The smell of bread baking before dawn. Children's laughter echoing beneath the rafters. A grandfather's story shared beside the fire. The quiet comfort of knowing that, no matter what the day has brought, this humble cottage will be waiting when evening returns. The embers grow dimmer now. Your breathing slows with the gentle rhythm of the night. Outside, the first hint of dawn is still many hours away. There is nowhere else you would rather be. Not because your home is grand, but because it is yours. It has sheltered your family through changing seasons and uncertain harvests. It has stood patiently against rain, wind, and snow. It has asked for little in return beyond steady hands to mend its roof and care for its walls. As sleep finally carries you into peaceful dreams, another quiet truth settles gently into your heart. A house may protect the body, but it is the people gathered around the hearth who make it truly warm. Morning, however, is never far away. Before long, the familiar church bell will once again drift across the valley. The fire will be coaxed back to life. The wooden door will open. And you, now stronger than ever before, will step into another season of work. For while your cottage has offered shelter from the world itself is about to test you in ways no roof, however sturdy, can keep outside. But that is a story for another evening, when the dawn carries us gently from the warmth of home into the quiet realities of health, illness, and the fragile balance of medieval life. When getting sick could change everything. A village without doctors. The darkness behind your closed eyes slowly gives way to a soft grey light. Long before the sun itself appears above the hills, the cottage is already beginning to wake. The embers resting beneath yesterday's ash still hold a little warmth. Your mother kneels beside the hearth, carefully feeding it handfuls of dry twigs until tiny flames begin to dance once more. The familiar scent of wood smoke fills the room. Someone yawns. Someone stretches beneath a blanket of rough wool. Outside, the rooster proudly announces a sunrise that has not quite arrived. Another ordinary day has begun. You pull on your simple clothes, still cool from the night's air, and step outside into the crisp morning. Tiny beads of dew cling to every blade of grass. Mist hangs low over the fields, drifting lazily between the hedgerows like a blanket that has forgotten to leave. The village stirs one family at a time. A door creaks open nearby. A woman carries water from the well. A farmer leads a patient ox toward the fields. Children rub sleepy eyes while chasing stubborn chickens away from the vegetable garden. Everything feels wonderfully familiar. The rhythm has become as dependable as the turning of the seasons. You know who bakes bread before sunrise. You know which chimney sends up smoke first. You know where the blacksmith will soon begin striking glowing iron with his hammer. There is comfort in knowing what each day will likely bring. Yet beneath that comforting routine lies something no one can truly predict. No one knows who will wake healthy tomorrow. And no one knows who will not. That uncertainty lives quietly beside every household, rarely spoken of unless it comes knocking at the door. Today, as fortune would have it, your own body feels strong. Your arms are rested. Your legs are ready for another day's work. You hardly think about your heartbeat, your breathing, or the countless small miracles quietly happening inside you every moment. Most healthy people never do. It is easy to forget how remarkable good health feels until it begins to slip away. For you, a scratch on the hand is simply a scratch. A cough is only a cough. A sore throat is an annoyance that will probably disappear after a night's sleep. In your own time, these little troubles often remain exactly that. Minor inconveniences. Perhaps you visit a nearby clinic. Perhaps a pharmacist recommends medicine. Perhaps you stay home beneath a warm blanket with a cup of tea while your body quietly repairs itself. You expect improvement. Most of the time, you receive it. Here, however, those comforting expectations do not yet exist. There is no village clinic waiting at the edge of town. No bright waiting room. No shelves lined with carefully labeled medicines. No ambulance racing across the countryside. Most villages across medieval Europe have never seen a trained physician at all. If one exists, he is likely many miles away in a wealthy city, serving nobles, merchants, bishops, or kings rather than ordinary farming families like yours. For most people, illness remains a deeply personal matter. It stays inside the home. The family watches. The neighbors quietly help. Everyone hopes. You may wonder who cares for the sick. The answer, more often than not, is simply everyone else. Your mother knows which herbs ease an upset stomach because her own mother taught her. Your grandmother remembers leaves gathered each spring that soothe burns or calm aching joints. An older neighbor insists that honey helps a sore throat. Another believes garlic keeps harmful sickness away. Some remedies truly offer comfort. Others help mostly because they allow frightened people to feel that something is being done. It can be surprisingly difficult, even for modern scientists, to separate useful traditions from hopeful guesses. The people of your village do not have laboratories. They have generations of observation. Sometimes that wisdom proves remarkably accurate. Willow bark, for example, contains natural compounds related to ingredients later used in modern pain relief. Honey can indeed help certain wounds stay cleaner than they otherwise might. Clean flowing water often proves safer than stagnant pools, even if no one yet understands the invisible reasons why. Centuries of careful experience occasionally stumble upon truths long before anyone can explain them. Just as often, though, the explanations point in entirely different directions. A fever may be blamed on bad air drifting through the valley. Persistent pain might be explained as an imbalance within the body. An illness arriving after a harsh winter could be understood as part of God's mysterious plan. These ideas do not sound foolish to the people living them. They are sincere attempts to understand a world whose smallest secrets remain hidden. After all, no one has yet seen a bacterium. No one has looked through a microscope. No one knows that tiny living organisms travel silently from person to person, far too small for human eyes to notice. The very idea would sound almost magical. Instead, people rely on what they can observe. They notice that sickness sometimes spreads through families. They notice that crowded places often become dangerous. They notice that some survive while others do not. Patterns appear. The reasons remain uncertain. Even the wisest healer must often admit, quietly and humbly, that nature keeps many of its answers to itself. That uncertainty shapes nearly every part of village life. A simple cut earned while chopping wood receives careful attention, not because anyone understands infection as you do today, but because experience has taught that neglected wounds sometimes become frighteningly worse. A cough lingering too long draws concerned glances. A child who suddenly grows quiet instead of playful causes every parent to worry. No one needs a medical degree to recognize when someone they love is suffering. The language of concern has always been universal. As you walk through the village that morning, nothing seems unusual. Smoke rises peacefully into the cool air. The church bell rings across the valley with its familiar steady voice. A dog trots happily along the muddy lane, pausing only long enough to sniff yesterday's footprints. The world appears calm. Yet hidden beneath that peaceful surface is a truth every medieval family understands better than they wish. Good health is never something to take for granted. It is a quiet gift, renewed one ordinary morning at a time. And because no one can be certain how long that gift will last, every sunrise carries both gratitude and just a little uncertainty. Tomorrow may look exactly like today. Or tomorrow may ask far more of you than anyone expects. That uncertainty, more than almost anything else, quietly shapes what it means to live in the medieval world. And before long, you will discover that even the smallest injury can tell a story far larger than the wound itself. A small cut, a serious problem. The day's work begins much as it always does. The sun climbs steadily above the rooftops, warming the dew that only moments ago shimmered across the grass. The village slowly fills with familiar sounds. An axe taps against seasoned wood. Sheep call to one another from a nearby pasture. Somewhere beyond the cottages, the steady rhythm of a mill wheel turns without hurry, just as it did yesterday and the day before that. You scarcely notice how many sharp edges surround an ordinary morning. The sickle that trims grain. The knife that slices bread. The rough splinters hiding within a weathered fence. The iron hook hanging beside the stable door. The broken edge of a clay pot. Each is a simple tool or a small imperfection. Each carries the possibility of leaving behind a tiny wound. Most days, nothing happens. A careful hand avoids the blade. A sturdy glove softens the scrape. A bit of luck keeps the sharp corner just out of reach. Life continues without interruption. But luck has always been an uncertain companion. As you help repair a wooden fence at the edge of a pasture, your hand slips for only the briefest moment. A rough splinter catches the side of your palm. It is hardly dramatic. You pull your hand back with a quiet hiss of surprise. A thin line of bright red appears against your skin. A drop of blood follows. You wipe it against your tunic almost without thinking. The sting fades within minutes. Work continues. In your own time, you might rinse the cut beneath clean running water. You might wash it with soap, apply an antiseptic, perhaps cover it with a small bandage, and think no more about it. Within a few days, you would probably forget exactly which hand had been injured. Here, your choices are rather different. Water is certainly available. But clean water is precious. Soap exists, though it is not the gentle, scented kind resting beside modern sinks. Medieval soap is often coarse, made from animal fat and wood ash. It serves well enough for laundry or certain household tasks, but frequent hand-washing is not yet understood as a powerful defense against disease. Not because people dislike cleanliness. Quite the opposite. People wash when they can. They value fresh clothes, clean faces, and orderly homes. They simply do not know about the invisible passengers that travel from one surface to another. The tiny organisms that you would call bacteria remain entirely beyond human sight. To the people around you, the wound looks reassuringly small. Your mother examines it for only a moment before wrapping it with a strip of clean linen. She has done this many times before. Her own hands bear pale scars from countless seasons of work. She knows that most cuts heal. She hopes this one will too. Hope, in medieval medicine, is never in short supply. The days pass. At first, everything seems perfectly ordinary. The cut closes. The bleeding stops. You return to gathering firewood, carrying water, and feeding the chickens as though nothing had happened. Then, one evening, the skin around the wound feels strangely warm. The next morning it appears slightly swollen. By afternoon, the redness has spread beyond the little scratch itself. Your hand aches more than such a tiny injury should. You cannot explain why. Neither can anyone else. Today, these are warning signs that many people recognize immediately. A healthcare professional might suspect an infection before you even finish describing your symptoms. Antibiotics, if appropriate, could often stop the problem before it grows much worse. For you, these medicines are so familiar that it is easy to forget how astonishing they truly are. They belong to a future still hundreds of years away. Here, no one can simply swallow a pill that quietly destroys harmful bacteria. The infection, if one has begun, must run its uncertain course. Your family notices your discomfort. They change the bandage. They gently clean the wound as best they know how. Perhaps an herbal poultice is prepared from plants gathered nearby. Cool cloths soothe the swelling. Prayers are offered with quiet sincerity. Every act comes from genuine care. No one is neglecting you. They are using the best knowledge available to them. Sometimes, that is enough. The body possesses remarkable powers of healing. Even without modern medicine, countless injuries mend on their own. Bones knit together. Skin closes. Bruises fade from deep purple to pale yellow before disappearing entirely. Human beings have always been more resilient than we sometimes remember. Yet there are moments when the body needs help it cannot receive. An infection may spread beyond the skin into deeper tissues. A fever may follow. The arm becomes stiff. Sleep grows restless. What began as a splinter no longer feels like a splinter at all. It feels as though your own hand has turned against you. No one in the cottage understands exactly why. They only know that this has happened before. Perhaps not in their own family. Perhaps to a neighbor. Or an uncle. Or the old carpenter who once cut his thumb while shaping a wagon wheel. Everyone remembers stories. They travel through villages almost as faithfully as the seasons themselves. Stories of people who recovered against all expectation. Stories of children whose fevers broke just before dawn. Stories of wounds that looked harmless until they suddenly were not. Such memories teach caution. Not because people understand germs, but because experience has taught them that appearances can be deceiving. A tiny wound deserves respect. Not fear. Not panic. Simply respect. As the evening settles once more over the village, you sit quietly beside the hearth, your wrapped hand resting carefully in your lap. The fire crackles with the same comforting rhythm it always has. The walls of the cottage remain as sturdy as ever. Outside, the stars appear one by one across the darkening sky. The world itself seems unchanged. And yet your family watches you just a little more closely than they did yesterday. Not because they know what tomorrow will bring, but because they know they do not. In the medieval world, that uncertainty is perhaps the hardest burden of all. The difference between a long, healthy life and a tragic one is not always decided by great battles or dangerous journeys. Sometimes, it begins with nothing more than a splinter no longer than your little fingernail. The village healer. Morning arrives wrapped in a cool blanket of mist. The familiar church bell carries softly across the valley, calling the village into another day of work. Doors open one by one. Smoke rises from thatched roofs. Somewhere nearby, a cow complains impatiently that breakfast is taking longer than expected. Ordinarily, you would already be outside. There would be water to fetch, animals to feed, fences to inspect after the night's damp air. Instead, you remain seated beside the hearth. Your hand has grown stiff. The linen wrapped around it no longer feels comfortably snug. It feels tight. Your mother gently unwraps the bandage. The skin around the wound is redder than yesterday. The swelling has crept farther across your palm. She says nothing for a moment. She simply studies it with the quiet concentration that comes from years of caring for children. Then she looks toward your father. No words are needed. He understands immediately. Today, work in the fields can wait. There is someone else you must visit. Every village has people whose knowledge reaches beyond ordinary household experience. Sometimes they are elderly women who have spent decades gathering herbs from forests and meadows. Sometimes they are monks or nuns who have learned remedies preserved in monastery gardens. Occasionally, in larger towns, there may even be a barber surgeon, someone who pulls teeth, sets broken bones, and performs operations that would make even the bravest modern patient grip the chair a little tighter. But in a small farming village like yours, help usually comes from someone known simply as the healer. Not because they possess magical powers, not because they can cure every illness, but because they have seen more sickness than most. They remember what helped. They remember what failed. And perhaps most importantly, they know when a family needs reassurance as much as medicine. You and your father follow the muddy lane through the village. The morning air is fresh with the scent of damp earth and newly cut wood. Neighbors nod as you pass. One offers a quiet greeting. Another notices the bandage around your hand and gives a sympathetic smile. No explanation is necessary. Everyone understands that injuries are part of life. The healer's cottage stands near the edge of the village, where a small garden catches the morning sunlight. At first glance, it looks much like every other home. A thatched roof, stone walls, a wooden door polished smooth by countless visitors. Only the garden hints that something different happens here. Neat rows of herbs grow in carefully tended beds. Bundles of drying plants hang beneath the eaves. Lavender sways gently in the breeze. Sage fills the air with its earthy fragrance. Rosemary stretches toward the light. Mint grows enthusiastically wherever it can find room. Many of these plants truly possess useful qualities. Some calm upset stomachs. Some ease minor aches. Others help flavor food or preserve it a little longer. Modern science has confirmed that not every traditional remedy was simply wishful thinking. Generations of careful observation often uncovered genuine benefits, even when people could not explain why. The healer welcomes you inside with kind, weathered eyes. Age has bent her back slightly, but not her curiosity. Her hands move slowly, yet confidently. They are the hands of someone who has tied countless bandages, comforted frightened children, and sat beside many beds through long nights. She asks how the injury happened. Your father explains. She listens without interrupting. Then she unwraps the linen. For several moments she says nothing at all. She studies the swelling. She gently presses the skin around the wound. You wince. She notices. Experience, more than any written book, guides much of what she does. Books themselves are rare and expensive. Many healers cannot simply reach for a shelf filled with medical texts. Instead, knowledge lives in memory. It passes from teacher to student, from parent to child, from one careful observer to the next. Each generation adds a little. Each generation forgets a little too. The healer prepares a fresh dressing. She cleans the wound as carefully as she knows how. Perhaps she applies a poultice made from herbs long believed to reduce swelling. Perhaps she recommends honey, valued by many medieval healers for treating wounds. Without realizing it, she may be using one of the more effective treatments available. Modern researchers have discovered that honey can discourage the growth of certain harmful bacteria and help protect wounds under the right conditions. She cannot explain the chemistry. She does not need to. She has simply noticed that some wounds seem to fare better when treated this way. This is how much practical knowledge grows. Observation first. Explanation much later. Before you leave, she offers quiet advice. Keep the wound covered. Rest the hand if possible. Return if the swelling worsens. Pray. Hope. Wait. There is remarkable honesty in her words. She does not promise a cure. She cannot. No healer of her time truly can. Medicine in the medieval world often walks hand in hand with uncertainty. Sometimes patients recover despite receiving little treatment. Sometimes they decline despite everyone's best efforts. The healer has lived long enough to know the difference between confidence and certainty. They are not the same thing. As you step back into the morning sunshine, your freshly wrapped hand feels a little more comfortable. Whether that comfort comes from the new bandage, the soothing herbs, or simply the reassurance that someone experienced has cared for you is impossible to say. Perhaps it is a little of all three. Your father places a reassuring hand upon your shoulder as you begin the walk home. Neither of you speaks very much. The birds continue singing. Children laugh somewhere near the village well. A cart rattles slowly down the lane, its wooden wheels bumping over familiar stones. Life carries on exactly as it always has. That is one of the curious things about illness. To the person who is suffering, it can seem to fill the entire world. Yet beyond the cottage door, beyond the fields, beyond the village green, the ordinary rhythm of life continues almost unchanged. The wheat still ripens beneath the sun. The river continues its quiet journey toward the sea. The seasons refuse to pause. And so, with gentle patience, all you can do now is return home. And wait to discover whether your own body is quietly winning the battle taking place beneath a single layer of wounded skin. Food was your medicine until it wasn't. Eating with the seasons. Your hand, thankfully, begins to heal. Not all at once. The swelling eases little by little. The redness slowly retreats. Each morning, your fingers bend a little more easily than the day before. The village healer's careful bandage is changed, your family continues to watch over you, and your own body quietly finishes the work that no one can see. There is no grand celebration when the danger passes. Only a deep, silent gratitude. Before long, you are once again walking the familiar paths between the fields, carrying water, gathering firewood, and lending your hands wherever they are needed. Life settles back into its steady rhythm, as though the frightening interruption had been nothing more than a passing storm. Yet recovering from illness leaves you noticing something you had overlooked before. Every meal placed upon the table feels a little more precious. When your body is strong, it is easy to take food for granted. When it has been weak, even a simple bowl of warm porridge carries a quiet comfort. As the morning sun rises over the valley, breakfast is already waiting. It is modest, but filling. A coarse loaf of dark bread rests on the wooden table, baked from rye or barley rather than the snowy white flour that only wealthy households can regularly afford. Beside it sits a steaming pot of oat porridge, stirred slowly over the fire. A small piece of cheese is carefully divided so everyone receives a little. Nothing is wasted. Not a crumb. Not a spoonful. In the medieval village, every harvest has demanded months of labor, and every meal reflects that effort. Your family does not choose food by browsing shelves or reading labels. The seasons choose for you. Spring brings tender greens, onions, and herbs that have survived the winter. Summer fills the gardens with peas, beans, cabbage, and fresh berries gathered from nearby hedgerows. Autumn rewards long months of work with apples, root vegetables, grains, and precious nuts stored for colder days. Winter is quieter. The table grows simpler. The cellar and pantry become as important as the fields once were. Dried beans, salted meat when available, hard cheese, onions, and carefully stored grain must last until the earth begins producing once again. Every season teaches patience. You cannot hurry strawberries into December. You cannot expect fresh apples in early spring. Nature decides the menu, and the village accepts her decision without complaint. That does not mean every meal is joyful. There are years when rain falls too heavily. Years when frost arrives too soon. Years when insects feast upon crops before people can. A poor harvest is never merely disappointing. It quietly follows the village through every meal that comes after it. A loaf of bread grows smaller. The stew contains more water than vegetables. Parents glance at one another before serving themselves last. Children are given the larger portions whenever possible. No one speaks much about sacrifice. They simply practice it. Even in good years, the meals remain wonderfully ordinary. Bread, porridge, vegetables, occasional eggs, milk if the animals are healthy, fish where rivers are generous. Meat, for most families, is an uncommon guest rather than a daily companion. Ironically, this simple diet is healthier in some ways than people of later centuries might expect. It is rich in grains, vegetables, and hard-earned physical activity. But it also depends completely upon the success of the harvest. When food is plentiful, the village thrives. When nature falters, every household feels the change. As you finish your breakfast and step once more into the morning sunlight, the fields stretch before you like a great green promise. They will feed your family. If the weather is kind. If the soil remains faithful. If fortune chooses to smile. In the medieval world, every meal begins long before it reaches the table. It begins with a seed placed carefully into the earth. And with the quiet hope that, months from now, there will be enough for everyone. When the harvest failed. For much of the year, your village lives with quiet confidence. The fields are green. The wheat sways gently in the summer breeze. The vegetable gardens slowly fill with cabbage, beans, onions, and turnips. Apple trees grow heavier as autumn approaches, and the chickens scratch happily through the yard in search of insects. Looking around, it is easy to believe that there will always be enough. Nature, however, has a habit of reminding people that she makes no promises. Sometimes the rain falls for weeks without stopping. The fields become heavy with water, and young crops begin to rot before they can ripen. Other years, the clouds simply refuse to come. The ground hardens beneath the sun, cracking like old pottery. Seeds struggle to grow, and the green fields slowly fade to dusty brown. A single late frost can destroy blossoms that seemed perfectly healthy the day before. A violent storm may flatten grain only days before harvest. Even tiny creatures can become unexpected enemies. Mice slip into the granary. Locusts or caterpillars feast on tender leaves. Mold quietly spreads through stored grain if too much moisture finds its way inside. None of these disasters announces itself with great drama. Instead, they arrive one small disappointment at a time. A few missing stalks. A lighter basket than expected. A field that should have been golden but remains patchy and thin. Only after weeks pass does the full truth become impossible to ignore. There will not be enough. When that realization settles over the village, life changes in subtle ways. No one panics. There is little point. Instead, people become careful. Very careful. Bread is sliced a little thinner. The stew receives an extra ladle of water. The cheese is saved for special occasions rather than ordinary meals. Parents quietly insist they are not hungry, even when everyone knows they are. Children often eat first. The adults tell themselves they can manage with less. Sometimes they can. Sometimes they cannot. The village learns to stretch every harvest as far as it will go. Nothing edible is wasted. Vegetable scraps become soup. Stale bread is softened in broth. Apples too bruised to store are cooked before they spoil. Even weeds that modern gardeners might pull without a second thought can become part of a meal if they are known to be safe. Resourcefulness becomes as valuable as the harvest itself. Yet there are limits to what careful planning can accomplish. If the crops fail badly enough, no amount of thrift can replace food that simply does not exist. For wealthier families, poor harvests are unpleasant. For poorer ones, they can be dangerous. There are no supermarkets receiving deliveries from distant lands. No refrigerated trucks bringing fresh produce from warmer climates. No cargo ships carrying grain across oceans to fill empty storehouses. Your village depends largely upon the land surrounding it. When that land struggles, so do the people. Ironically, many medieval farmers understand the soil better than you might expect. They know which fields produce the strongest grain. They notice how crops grow differently after beans have enriched the earth. They leave some fields uncultivated for a season so the ground may recover its strength. Though they cannot explain the chemistry, generations of careful observation have taught them valuable lessons about caring for the land. Knowledge, however, cannot control the weather. The sky answers to no farmer. As autumn draws nearer, the villagers gather what little the fields have offered. The harvest festival is quieter this year. There is still gratitude. There is always gratitude. But there is also uncertainty. Each sack of grain stored in the granary is counted with unusual care. Each barrel is sealed tightly against damp and hungry mice. Everyone understands that these stores must last through the long winter ahead. The cold months have not yet arrived. Already, people are thinking about them. As evening settles over the village, you carry a small basket of onions back toward the cottage. The air smells of wood smoke, and the setting sun paints the fields in shades of gold that almost hide how little they have yielded. From a distance, everything still looks peaceful. The cottages stand where they always have. The church bell still marks the passing hours. Children still laugh as they chase one another along the lane. Life goes on. And perhaps that is the most remarkable part of all. Even in difficult years, the village does not surrender to despair. It works. It shares. It endures. Because the people here have learned a quiet truth passed from one generation to the next. A good harvest fills the stomach. But it is patience, generosity, and the willingness to face another sunrise together that help a community survive until spring. And when winter finally arrives, those lessons will be tested more than ever before. Winter's long table. With the harvest safely stored, the pace of life begins to change. The days grow shorter. Each morning, the sun takes a little longer to climb above the hills, and each evening it slips away a little sooner. A chill settles over the valley, first as a gentle reminder, then as a constant companion. The trees slowly surrender their leaves. One by one, they drift to the ground, covering the paths in shades of gold and brown. You know what their falling means. Winter is on its way. Inside the cottage, preparations continue with quiet determination. Bundles of onions hang from the rafters. Barrels filled with grain are tucked safely into the driest corner of the storeroom. Strings of herbs, gathered during the warmth of summer, remain suspended from wooden beams, waiting to flavor the simple meals of colder months. Every family works with the same purpose. Not to become wealthy. Simply to be ready. The winter table looks very different from the one you enjoyed only a few months earlier. Fresh berries are gone. Tender greens have disappeared from the gardens. The sweet smell of ripe apples becomes an occasional memory rather than a daily pleasure. Instead, meals grow heartier. A pot of thick pottage simmers gently over the fire, made from barley or oats with cabbage, onions, beans, and whatever vegetables have been carefully stored. If the family has managed to preserve a little salted pork or smoked fish, a small piece may be added to flavor the entire meal. The meat itself is less important than the richness it gives to every spoonful. A single piece can season a pot shared by everyone. Nothing is wasted. Not the broth. Not the last crust of bread. Even bones are boiled again, drawing out every bit of nourishment they can offer. To modern eyes, the meals may seem repetitive. To you, they are reassuring. Each bowl means the family has made it through another day. Each loaf of bread means the grain stores are still holding. Each evening meal is a quiet promise that tomorrow may be met with strength rather than hunger. The villagers become skilled at preserving what nature has provided. Without refrigerators or freezers, they rely on methods that have served countless generations. Meat is salted to slow spoilage. Fish is smoked over gentle fires. Vegetables are stored in cool cellars where the winter frost cannot easily reach them. Some foods are dried beneath the summer sun long before winter arrives. These methods do not keep everything fresh. They simply help food last a little longer. Sometimes, that little longer is enough. Of course, not every meal tastes wonderful. Salted meat can become tough. Stored vegetables slowly lose some of their freshness. Bread baked from older grain grows denser as the months pass. But when the wind howls outside and snow gathers against the cottage walls, warmth matters more than variety. A hot meal is a comfort all its own. As evening settles over the village, your family gathers once again around the hearth. The same fire that warmed you through the night now cooks your supper. Its gentle crackle fills the room while shadows dance across the timber walls. Your father slices the bread with practiced care. Your mother ladles steaming pottage into wooden bowls. Everyone waits until each person has been served before beginning to eat. There is little conversation. Not because anyone is unhappy, but because the meal itself deserves attention. You eat slowly, gratefully. Outside, the wind brushes against the thatched roof. Somewhere beyond the cottage, an owl begins its nightly hunt. The world feels quiet. Safe. For this evening, at least. Yet winter is a patient season. It asks more than warm clothing and a well-stocked pantry. It asks endurance. Weeks of cold become months. The stores of grain grow a little smaller with every passing meal. Each loaf of bread quietly reminds the family that spring is still a long way off. No one knows exactly whether the food will last until the first fresh shoots appear in the fields again. They can only measure carefully, waste nothing, and hope the seasons keep their ancient promise. Because in the medieval world, survival is rarely won by a single great act of courage. More often, it is earned one simple supper at a time. One carefully sliced loaf. One shared pot of stew. One winter evening gathered around a faithful fire, trusting that tomorrow's table will still have enough to welcome everyone who sits beside it. The water you trusted. Every drop had a story. Tomorrow begins, as so many mornings do, with an empty bucket. Before bread is baked. Before the animals are fed. Before anyone walks toward the fields. Someone must fetch water. This morning, it is your turn. The wooden bucket swings gently from your hand as you step into the cool dawn. A light mist still clings to the village paths, and the first birds are already greeting the rising sun from the hedgerows. The village well stands near the center of the small community. It is more than a place to collect water. It is where neighbors exchange greetings before the day's work begins. Children wait impatiently for their turn to lower the bucket. Older villagers share quiet news while leaning against the worn stone rim. Life seems to gather here, one conversation at a time. You join the short line, listening to the familiar creak of the rope as another bucket disappears into the darkness below. A splash echoes upward. Moments later, the bucket returns, heavy with cold, clear water. It looks wonderfully clean. The surface reflects the pale morning sky like polished glass. You fill your own bucket and begin the careful walk home, trying not to spill more than a few precious drops. Every step reminds you how valuable water truly is. It is needed for drinking, for cooking, for making bread, for washing vegetables freshly gathered from the garden, for the animals waiting in their pens, for cleaning wooden bowls after supper. Almost every task depends upon it. Unlike your own time, there is no tap waiting inside the cottage wall. No simple twist of a handle. Every bucket has been carried by someone's hands. That effort teaches people not to waste what they have worked so hard to collect. Back at home, your mother pours some of the fresh water into an iron pot hanging above the fire. Another portion is saved for the day's meals. A little is set aside for washing hands before preparing food. Not because anyone yet understands invisible microbes, but because clean hands simply feel proper before handling bread. Contrary to a popular modern myth, medieval people did not spend their lives trying to avoid water. They washed their faces. They cleaned their hands. Many bathed whenever circumstances allowed. Those living near rivers often took advantage of warmer weather. Public bathhouses existed in many medieval towns, offering places where people could wash, relax, and enjoy conversation. Keeping reasonably clean was generally considered both pleasant and respectable. The challenge was not a lack of interest in cleanliness. It was a lack of convenience. Heating enough water for a full bath required time, fuel, and considerable effort. Carrying bucket after bucket from the well was no small task. During the coldest months, bathing could become uncomfortable, even risky, if warmth was scarce. People adapted to the world they lived in, just as they adapted to every other challenge. As the morning continues, you help refill a wooden barrel inside the cottage. The water will serve many purposes before another journey to the well becomes necessary. Nothing is taken for granted. Nothing is used carelessly. Every drop represents a walk, a full bucket, and aching arms. You pause for a moment beside the open doorway. The village is fully awake now. Smoke rises lazily from dozens of chimneys. The blacksmith's hammer rings steadily across the square. A cart creaks along the muddy lane, its wheels leaving fresh tracks from yesterday's rain. Everything feels fresh, orderly, clean in its own quiet way. Yet beneath the clear surface of the well water lies a mystery that no one in the village can possibly see. It is a mystery so small that it escapes every human eye. One that will shape the health of entire families without ever announcing its presence. And it will take many centuries before anyone discovers that the greatest dangers hidden in a bucket of water are often the ones that appear perfectly invisible. The invisible world no one could see. You dip a wooden ladle into the bucket and take a long drink. The water is cool, fresh, refreshing after the walk home from the well. To you, it tastes exactly as good water should. And that is precisely the problem. In the medieval world, people judge water by the only senses they possess. They look at it. They smell it. They taste it. If it is clear, pleasant, and free from strange odors, it seems perfectly safe. Most of the time, it probably is. Many village wells are carefully dug and thoughtfully maintained. Families understand that a polluted well can make life difficult, even if they cannot explain exactly why. They keep animals away when possible and take pride in protecting one of the community's most valuable resources. Experience has taught them that clean-looking water is usually better than muddy water. Running streams are often preferred over stagnant pools. Fresh springs are especially treasured. These observations are often wise. Yet they cannot reveal the whole story. Far beneath the surface of the water lives an entire world that no one has yet discovered. Tiny organisms drift unseen. Some are harmless. Some are even helpful. Others can bring terrible illness. But in your village, no one knows they exist. The microscope will not be invented for centuries. The idea that invisible living creatures might cause disease would sound almost impossible to imagine. Instead, people search for explanations they can understand. Perhaps foul-smelling air has caused the sickness. Perhaps unusual weather has upset the body's balance. Perhaps the illness is simply one of life's many mysteries. Without the ability to see the true cause, every explanation feels incomplete. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle while half the pieces remain invisible. That is what medieval medicine is often like. The villagers are intelligent observers. They notice patterns. If several families become ill after drinking from a particular pond, people may begin avoiding it. If a spring has supplied healthy water for generations, it earns everyone's trust. Knowledge grows through careful experience. But experience alone cannot uncover everything. Sometimes a well appears perfectly healthy while hidden contamination slowly finds its way underground. A nearby animal may have died weeks earlier. Heavy rain might wash waste into places no one expects. The water remains crystal clear. Nothing about its appearance offers even the smallest warning. Today, laboratories can test water in remarkable detail. Scientists can detect organisms so tiny that millions could fit inside a single drop. Water treatment plants filter, disinfect, and monitor supplies before they reach your kitchen tap. Most people rarely think about the enormous effort required to make that possible. It simply happens. Here, every drink depends largely upon trust. Trust in the well. Trust in the spring. Trust in generations of experience. And often, that trust is rewarded. Despite popular imagination, medieval villagers are not constantly falling ill from every cup they drink. Many communities enjoy surprisingly reliable sources of fresh water for years at a time. If they did not, villages could scarcely survive. Still, uncertainty is never far away. When illness does appear, its arrival often feels random. One household remains healthy. Another loses several family members to a sickness no one can explain. Two neighbors drink from the same bucket. One recovers after a few miserable days. The other grows steadily weaker. Without understanding bacteria, viruses, or parasites, such differences seem deeply mysterious. They become stories shared around winter fires. Stories of fortunate recoveries. Stories of heartbreaking losses. Stories reminding everyone how fragile good health can be. As the afternoon sun warms the village, children laugh beside the well while filling smaller buckets for their families. Women rinse vegetables before preparing the evening meal. A farmer splashes cool water across his face after hours in the fields. The well continues serving the village exactly as it has for countless seasons. It is, in many ways, the heart of the community. A place of life. A place of conversation. A place of necessity. Yet even the most dependable well cannot reveal every secret hidden beneath its calm surface. Some truths are simply too small for the human eye. The people of your village cannot be blamed for failing to see what no one in the world has yet discovered. They are doing what people have always done. Learning from observation. Sharing knowledge. Caring for one another as best they can. Sometimes that is enough. Sometimes nature keeps her smallest secrets just a little longer. And before many days have passed, you will discover that water is only one part of staying healthy. Because the simple act of keeping a home clean, something that seems so ordinary today, was an endless task in a world where every broom, every cloth, and every clean floor had to be earned through patient, everyday work. Keeping a cottage clean. As you step back inside, the warmth of the hearth welcomes you. The fire crackles softly, filling the room with its familiar glow. Your boots leave faint traces of mud near the doorway, a reminder that no matter how carefully you walk, a farming village has a way of following you home. Keeping a medieval cottage clean is not a task that ever truly ends. It simply changes with the hour. Before breakfast, the ashes from yesterday's fire are carefully gathered. Some will be carried outside. Some may even be saved, for wood ash has many uses around the home, from making coarse soap to helping with certain household chores. Nothing useful is thrown away without thought. Your mother takes a simple broom made from bundles of twigs and begins sweeping the packed earth floor. There is no polished hardwood beneath your feet. No smooth tiles. No soft carpet waiting to catch the dust. Instead, the floor is firm soil, pressed flat by countless footsteps over many years. In wealthier homes, stone floors may be found. But here, earth is practical, warm enough in winter, and easy to repair when needed. Each sweep gathers bits of straw, crumbs of bread, dried leaves, and the fine dust carried in from the fields. By evening, there will be more. That is simply the nature of life on a farm. Modern homes are built to keep much of the outdoors outside. Your cottage makes no such promise. Every trip to the garden brings a little soil indoors. Every armful of firewood leaves behind bark and splinters. The family dog shakes rainwater across the floor after a wet morning. Even the gentle breeze drifting through the open doorway carries dust and tiny seeds. Cleanliness is not a destination. It is a daily rhythm. Clothing receives the same patient attention. You own very few garments. Perhaps only one everyday tunic and another kept for church or special occasions. Because replacing clothes requires so much labor, they are repaired again and again. A loose stitch is sewn before it becomes a tear. A worn elbow is patched instead of discarded. A missing button, if your clothing even has one, is replaced rather than ignored. Every thread matters. Laundry itself is a considerable undertaking. Water must be fetched. The fire must be fed. Large pots are heated until the water is warm enough for washing. Soap, often made from animal fat and wood ash, helps loosen dirt, though it is far rougher than the gentle bars you know today. Then comes the hardest part: scrubbing, rinsing, wringing out the heavy cloth by hand. Finally, the garments are hung outdoors whenever the weather allows, where sunlight and fresh air slowly finish the work. A single wash day may occupy nearly the entire day. For that reason, clothing is cared for thoughtfully between washes. People brush away loose dirt. They mend small damage quickly. They value every piece they own. Contrary to the popular image of medieval life as endlessly filthy, most families take real pride in keeping both themselves and their homes as clean as their circumstances allow. They understand that a tidy cottage feels more welcoming. Fresh straw is spread when the old bedding becomes worn. Wooden bowls are rinsed after meals. Food is covered whenever possible to keep curious mice away. The challenge is not laziness. It is the endless effort required. Everything takes time. Everything takes labor. As dusk settles outside, your family finishes the day's final chores. The broom is returned to its corner. The wooden table is wiped clean. The last bowl is stacked neatly beside the hearth. The cottage feels peaceful once again. Not perfect. No farmhouse ever is. A little dust still rests upon the rafters. A few muddy footprints remain near the door. Tomorrow's work has already begun to leave its mark before tomorrow has even arrived. Yet the room feels cared for, loved, lived in. Perhaps that is the quiet secret of cleanliness in the medieval world. It is not about creating a spotless house. It is about creating a home where people can eat, sleep, work, and care for one another with dignity, despite the constant demands of everyday life. Every job kept the village alive. More than just farmers. As dawn slowly brightens the eastern sky, you step outside into cool morning air. A thin layer of mist still clings to the fields, softening the outlines of cottages and fences. The familiar path beneath your feet is damp with dew, and somewhere in the distance, a blackbird welcomes the new day with a cheerful song. Most people in your village are farmers. Their lives follow the seasons. They plow in spring, tend growing crops through summer, harvest in autumn, and spend winter repairing tools, caring for animals, and preparing for another year. Without them, no one eats. But as you walk toward the center of the village, you begin to notice something easy to overlook. Not everyone spends the day in the fields. The rhythmic ringing you heard earlier grows louder. Clang, clang, clang. It comes from the blacksmith's workshop, where glowing iron is shaped into horseshoes, nails, hinges, knives, and plowshares. Sparks leap into the air each time the heavy hammer strikes the hot metal, briefly shining brighter than the morning sun. The blacksmith is one of the busiest people in the village. Every farmer depends upon strong tools. Every cart needs iron fittings. Every broken hinge eventually finds its way to this workshop. Without the blacksmith, even the hardest working farmer would struggle before long. A little farther along the lane, another craft quietly unfolds. The carpenter carefully measures a length of oak before guiding his saw through the wood with slow, practiced strokes. From sturdy timber come doors, tables, stools, wagons, barrels, and the beams that support cottages through long winters. Unlike today, there is no factory producing identical furniture by the thousands. Nearly everything is made by hand. Every chair carries the marks of the person who built it. Every table is slightly different from the next. Even the simplest object represents hours of careful labor. Nearby, the miller begins another day's work. Families arrive carrying sacks of grain harvested months earlier. The great millstone turns steadily, powered by the flowing stream beside it. Slowly, patiently, hard kernels become flour. Without the mill, baking bread would demand exhausting hours of grinding grain by hand. The turning wheel saves countless hours of labor for the entire village. Then there is the baker. Long before sunrise, while most people are still asleep, the oven has already been warming. The scent of fresh bread drifts through the morning air, guiding hungry villagers almost as surely as the church bell guides them to worship. Bread is not simply food. It is the foundation of nearly every meal. The baker's work nourishes the whole community. There are others as well. The shepherd watches over sheep grazing on distant hillsides. The potter shapes clay into bowls and cooking pots. The cooper carefully fits wooden staves together to make barrels sturdy enough to store grain, ale, or salted meat. The weaver patiently transforms wool into cloth. Each craft depends upon another. The blacksmith repairs the carpenter's tools. The carpenter builds shelves for the baker. The cooper provides barrels for the miller. The shepherd supplies wool for the weaver. Like threads woven into a single piece of cloth, every trade strengthens the others. No one truly stands alone. In your own time, it is easy to forget how many strangers contribute to your daily life. Electricians, mechanics, truck drivers, engineers, factory workers, farmers, and countless others perform jobs you may never personally witness. The medieval village is smaller. Its connections are easier to see. You know the people who make your bread. You greet the person who repairs your father's plough. You pass the blacksmith almost every morning. The community is not simply a collection of neighbors. It is a web of shared work, held together by trust and necessity. As the village comes fully alive, every workshop echoes with quiet purpose. No one is seeking fame. No one expects riches. Most are simply trying to do today's work well enough that tomorrow may be a little easier. Watching them, you begin to understand something that remains true even centuries later. A strong community is not built by one extraordinary person. It is built by many ordinary people, each faithfully doing a job that allows someone else to do theirs. And before this day is over, you will discover that learning those skills begins much earlier in life than you might ever expect. Learning before you were grown. You stop outside the carpenter's workshop for a moment. Inside, the master carpenter carefully smooths the edge of a wooden plank with a hand plane. Curled ribbons of fresh wood fall gently onto the floor, filling the room with the warm scent of oak and pine. Beside him stands a boy who cannot be much older than 12. His work is very different. He is not shaping doors or building wagons. Instead, he gathers the wood shavings into neat piles, carries finished boards across the workshop, and hands the carpenter each tool before it is needed. The tasks seem small, but every one of them matters. No one expects him to build a table on his first day. Every craft begins with watching, then helping. Only much later does creating come on its own. In the medieval world, childhood is often much shorter than you might expect. Children certainly play. You have seen them chasing one another through the village lanes, skipping stones across the stream, and inventing games with little more than sticks and imagination. Laughter is as common here as it is in any century. But alongside play comes responsibility. From an early age, children begin learning the work that keeps their families alive. A farmer's son may help scatter seed across the fields before he is tall enough to guide the plough. A miller's daughter might carry small sacks of grain or sweep flour from the floor after a day's work. Young shepherds learn to watch over lambs long before they are trusted with the entire flock. Every season teaches another lesson. Every year brings another skill. For some children, learning takes place almost entirely at home. Parents patiently pass along knowledge gathered over a lifetime. How to sharpen a sickle. How to tell when rain is coming by watching the clouds. How to choose dry firewood instead of damp branches that fill the cottage with smoke. These lessons are rarely written down. They are demonstrated, repeated, practiced until they become second nature. In larger towns and cities, another path sometimes opens. A young person may become an apprentice. An apprentice lives and works with an experienced craftsperson, learning a trade over many years. The arrangement requires patience from both teacher and student. At first, the apprentice performs the simplest jobs: sweeping the floor, cleaning tools, fetching water, preparing materials. Little by little, greater responsibilities follow. Mistakes are expected. After all, no one is born knowing how to shape iron, weave cloth, or carve wood. Skill grows slowly, just like an oak tree. One careful season at a time. Modern schools teach many subjects within classrooms. Mathematics, history, science, languages. These are wonderful gifts. Yet much of medieval education happens through hands rather than books. Knowledge is carried in muscle memory. You learn by doing, by repeating, by standing beside someone whose hands have performed the same task thousands of times before. Books themselves are uncommon. Each one must be copied carefully by hand, page after page, a process that can take months or even years. For most village families, a library is something they will never see. That does not mean they are without knowledge. Far from it. The shepherd understands sheep better than many scholars ever could. The blacksmith knows exactly how hot iron should glow before it is ready for the hammer. The baker can judge dough by touch alone. Their wisdom lives in experience rather than ink. As you continue walking through the village, you pass children helping in gardens, gathering eggs from the henhouse, carrying kindling for the evening fire, and watching younger brothers and sisters while their parents work nearby. None of these tasks seem remarkable. That is precisely why they matter. The village depends upon countless small acts of responsibility, quietly shared across every generation. The skills you learn as a child will one day become the skills that feed your own family. The lessons passed from parent to child will continue long after both have grown old. Looking around, you begin to understand that every master craftsperson was once the child sweeping a workshop floor. Every experienced farmer once scattered seed with uncertain hands. Every village elder was once the youngest voice around the hearth. Growing up here is not marked by a single birthday. It happens one lesson at a time. One season after another. One ordinary day becoming the foundation for every day that follows. And tomorrow, as the village gathers in a place where nearly everyone comes together, you will discover that work is only one thread holding this community together. Faith, tradition, and shared moments of belonging are woven just as deeply into the fabric of medieval life. The bell that gathered everyone. The sound is clear and steady. It rolls gently across the fields, through the narrow lanes, and over the grazing pastures beyond the village. You have heard it every day for as long as you can remember. The church bell does more than announce the hour. It helps organize the rhythm of life itself. Long before clocks become common in ordinary homes, the bell tells people when the day begins, when worship is about to start, and when important events bring the village together. Almost everyone recognizes its voice. A slow toll may mark a funeral. A joyful peal may celebrate a wedding or a feast day. An urgent ringing can warn of danger, calling neighbors together when help is needed. One bell speaks many languages. This evening, its tone is calm. Families step out from their cottages, brushing flour from their hands or wiping the day's dust from their clothes. Children hurry to keep pace with their parents, while older villagers walk more slowly, greeting familiar faces along the way. The path to the church is one you know well. Grass grows softly along its edges, worn smooth by generations of footsteps. As you walk, you pass the same cottages, gardens, and fences that have shaped your everyday life. Nothing here feels grand. Everything feels familiar. The village church itself is simple compared with the great cathedrals found in distant cities. Its stone walls have weathered many winters. Its wooden door bears the marks of countless hands. Inside, candles flicker gently, filling the air with the faint scent of warm wax. Light filters through small windows, painting soft patterns across the worn stone floor. For many villagers, this is the largest building they regularly enter. It is a place of worship, certainly. But it is also something more. Here, neighbors meet after busy weeks in the fields. News is shared. Marriages are celebrated. Children are baptized. Families gather to mourn those who have reached the end of their journey. The church stands beside people during moments of great joy and deep sorrow alike. In a world where travel is uncommon, the village church becomes one of the few places where nearly everyone regularly gathers. Faith is an important part of medieval life. For most people in Europe, religious belief shapes the calendar, the seasons, and the understanding of the world itself. Questions about life, suffering, kindness, and hope are often answered through the teachings they hear each week. Whether rich or poor, young or old, nearly everyone shares in these traditions, even if their individual experiences and beliefs differ. The church also marks the passing of time. Special feast days break up the long months of work. Holy days offer welcome pauses from ordinary routines. The changing seasons are remembered not only by planting and harvest, but also by celebrations that bring the community together. These gatherings remind everyone that life is more than labor alone. As the service comes to an end, people do not hurry away. Small conversations begin near the doorway. A farmer asks after a neighbor's recovering child. The miller agrees to grind an extra sack of grain for an elderly widow. Children whisper quietly while trying not to disturb the adults. No one calls this building community. They are simply being neighbors. As twilight settles over the village, you begin the walk home with your family. The church bell has fallen silent now, leaving only the gentle chorus of evening crickets and the rustling of leaves in the cool breeze. The cottages ahead glow warmly through their small windows. Soon, another fire will be lit. Another simple meal will be shared. Another ordinary day will become a memory. Looking back once more, you realize that the strength of your village has never rested only in its fields, its workshops, or its harvests. It lives just as surely in the people who gather when they are needed. To celebrate. To comfort. To help. To remember. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson this little village has quietly been teaching you all along. A medieval life is not carried by one pair of hands. It is carried by many. Together. And with that comforting thought, the evening settles peacefully over the valley, while another chapter of your journey gently comes to a close. The world was smaller than you think. Leaving the village. Most mornings, you know exactly where the day will take you. The fields. The well. The blacksmith's forge. The mill beside the stream. Your world is wonderfully familiar, its paths worn smooth by years of walking the same ground. Today is different. Your father has decided to travel to the nearest market town, and for the first time in many months, you are old enough to accompany him. Before sunrise, the cottage is already awake. Your mother wraps a small loaf of dark bread and a piece of hard cheese in a clean linen cloth. A leather water flask is filled from the bucket beside the hearth. Your father checks the cart one last time, making certain its wooden wheels are firmly secured and the harness sits comfortably on the patient old horse. Nothing about the journey is hurried. There are no train schedules to catch. No engines waiting to start. Travel in the medieval world rewards steady preparation far more than speed. As the village slowly disappears behind you, the road stretches across the countryside like a narrow ribbon of packed earth. In places, it is smooth enough for the cart to roll easily. Elsewhere, recent rain has left deep ruts filled with muddy water. The horse picks its way carefully, knowing these paths almost as well as the people who travel them. You soon discover that roads are not empty places. A shepherd guides his flock toward fresh pasture, raising a hand in greeting as you pass. A merchant leads two heavily loaded pack horses carrying cloth, salt, and tools to villages farther away. A group of pilgrims walks together at an unhurried pace, their long staffs tapping gently against the road with every step. Each traveler has a destination. Each carries a story. For most villagers, however, such journeys are uncommon. Many people spend nearly their entire lives within a few miles of the place where they were born. That may sound surprising today, when crossing an entire country can take only a few hours. In your own time, airplanes carry millions of people across oceans every day. High-speed trains race between cities. Cars travel farther before lunchtime than many medieval farmers might travel in a year. Here, distance feels different. A journey of 20 miles is something to prepare for. A trip of 50 miles may require several days. Travel demands time, good weather, sturdy shoes, and a fair measure of patience. Yet the smaller world also creates something easily overlooked. Every hill becomes familiar. Every stream has a name. The old oak beside the crossroads has watched generations pass beneath its branches. The landscape is not simply scenery. It is part of everyday life. As the morning sun climbs higher, you pause beside a clear stream to rest the horse. Your father breaks the loaf of bread, handing you the larger piece without a word. Nearby, wildflowers sway gently in the breeze, while dragonflies skim across the surface of the water. There is no rush. The journey itself is as important as the destination. As you continue along the winding road, the countryside slowly begins to change. The fields grow larger. The number of travelers increases. In the distance, rising above the trees, you catch your first glimpse of something your village has never possessed. A tall stone wall. Beyond it, rooftops stretch toward the horizon. The market town awaits. It is larger, louder, and busier than anything you have ever seen. Within those walls, goods from distant places change hands. Stories travel almost as quickly as merchants. Ideas spread from one traveler to another. For someone who has spent most of life within the quiet embrace of a small village, it feels almost like stepping into another world. And as you guide the cart toward the open town gate, you begin to realize that although your world may seem small, it is connected to places far beyond the edge of the horizon in ways you are only just beginning to understand. Market Day. As your father's cart rolls beneath the stone archway, the world seems to grow louder with every turn of the wheel. Voices rise from every direction. Merchants call out the quality of their goods. Children weave between the crowds, laughing as they chase one another through the square. A horse stamps impatiently against the cobblestones. Somewhere nearby, a bell rings to mark the beginning of the day's trading. Your village has one muddy lane and a handful of cottages. The market town feels almost endless by comparison. Its streets are lined with workshops, inns, storehouses, and homes stacked closely together, their upper floors leaning slightly over the road below. Colorful cloth hangs from open windows, while signs carved with boots, barrels, or loaves of bread help visitors recognize each shop. Many people cannot read. Pictures speak clearly enough. Your father guides the cart toward the market square, where dozens of wooden stalls have already been arranged in neat rows. The air is alive with unfamiliar scents. Freshly baked bread mingles with smoked fish. Bundles of herbs perfume the breeze. Leather, beeswax, wool, and wood smoke all blend together into a fragrance unlike anything found in the open fields. You pause for a moment, simply taking it all in. There is so much to see. One merchant displays brightly dyed cloth in shades of deep blue, rich red, and forest green. Another carefully arranges iron tools, each one polished until it catches the sunlight. Nearby, a potter stacks bowls and jugs into careful towers, hoping they will survive the day without being knocked over by an excited customer. Not every stall offers necessities. A traveling musician plays a cheerful tune on a small fiddle while children gather around to listen. A storyteller entertains anyone willing to stop for a few moments, his voice rising and falling as he speaks of distant kingdoms, brave knights, and impossible adventures. Whether every tale is true hardly matters. A good story is worth hearing all the same. Your father greets people he has not seen since the last market. News travels with the merchants. One farmer speaks of an excellent harvest in a neighboring valley. Another has heard that a bridge farther south has finally been repaired after spring floods washed part of it away. A traveler mentioned seeing ships larger than any house, anchored in a distant port many days from here. For many villagers, the market is more than a place to buy and sell. It is where the wider world briefly comes to visit. Without newspapers, radios, or telephones, information moves at the speed of people. Every traveler carries a little piece of somewhere else. Some stories are accurate. Others grow a little more colorful with every village they pass through. It can be difficult to know which is which. Still, listening is part of the experience. As your father exchanges a sack of grain for several iron nails and a new knife, you notice that money changes hands less often than you expected. Coins are certainly used, especially in towns. But many everyday exchanges still involve trading one useful thing for another. A farmer may offer eggs. A shepherd may bring wool. A cooper might exchange a sturdy barrel for grain or cheese. Value is measured not only in silver, but in usefulness. Around midday, the square grows even busier. People from nearby villages continue arriving, each adding another voice to the cheerful noise. For a few hours, the town becomes a meeting place for hundreds of lives that usually remain scattered across the countryside. Then, almost as quietly as it began, the market slowly starts to change. A merchant folds his cloth. The potter wraps unsold bowls in straw. The musician packs away his fiddle. One by one, the carts turn toward home. The square begins to empty. Tomorrow, these streets will feel calmer once again. As you help your father secure the day's purchases in the cart, you glance back across the market one last time. Only this morning, it seemed impossibly large. Now it already feels a little more familiar. You realize that even though your village may be small, it is not isolated. Roads connect farms to towns. Towns connect to cities. Cities connect to distant ports and kingdoms far beyond anything you have ever seen. The world is larger than your village, but perhaps not quite as unreachable as it first appeared. And before the journey home is complete, your father will tell you a story that reveals just how slowly and how surprisingly news travels across the medieval world. News traveled one conversation at a time. The horse settles into an easy, unhurried pace. Its hooves tap softly against the road as the town slowly disappears behind you. The countryside opens once again into fields, hedgerows, and quiet woodland, where only birdsong interrupts the gentle creak of the cart. For a long while, neither you nor your father says very much. There is no need. The day has already been full of new sights. At last, your father points toward a group of travelers approaching from the opposite direction. They'll bring tomorrow's news, he says with a small smile. At first, the words seem puzzling. The travelers carry no letters for your village. No newspapers. No official announcements. Yet as they pass, they exchange greetings. A few friendly questions. A few brief answers. One mentions that the wheat harvest farther north has been excellent. Another warns that a bridge on the western road has become difficult to cross after recent rains. Someone has heard that a nobleman is preparing for a grand wedding several counties away. Someone else speaks of unusually cold weather arriving early in the hills. None of these conversations lasts more than a minute or two. Then the travelers continue on their separate ways. And just like that, the news begins another journey. In your own time, information travels almost instantly. A message can circle the world in seconds. A photograph taken in one country can be seen in another before the camera has even been put away. It is easy to forget how extraordinary that truly is. In the medieval world, every piece of news moves at the speed of a walking person, a horse, or a sailing ship. There is no faster way. If a king issues a new law hundreds of miles away, weeks may pass before your village hears about it. If a great battle is fought beyond the mountains, some people may learn of it only after travelers repeat the story again and again as they move from town to town. Sometimes the tale changes along the way. A small victory becomes a great triumph. A difficult journey becomes an impossible adventure. Each storyteller remembers different details. Each listener adds a little imagination before passing it onward. The result is a curious mixture of truth, memory, and rumor. That does not mean people are careless with information. Quite the opposite. They ask questions. They compare stories. If 3 different merchants mention poor harvests in the same region, villagers begin to believe it. If only one traveler tells an unbelievable tale of a dragon sleeping beneath a distant castle, most listeners enjoy the story without rushing to accept it as fact. People have always known that not every tale deserves equal trust. As the cart continues along the familiar road, your father begins sharing stories he has collected over many years of market days. He speaks of a merchant who once traveled all the way to the shores of the Great Sea, where ships larger than entire cottages carried spices, silk, and precious goods from lands almost beyond imagination. He remembers meeting a pilgrim who had walked for months, crossing forests, rivers, and mountains in search of a sacred destination. Whether every detail is perfectly accurate hardly matters. The stories remind you that the world stretches much farther than the hills surrounding your village. You may never see those distant places yourself. Most medieval villagers never do. Yet through travelers, the wider world quietly visits your doorstep. By the time the first cottages of your village appear in the evening light, you feel as though you have returned from somewhere much farther away than a single day's journey. The familiar church bell stands against the golden sky. Smoke rises gently from the chimneys. Children are gathering kindling before darkness settles over the valley. Everything is exactly where you left it. And yet, you have changed a little. Not because you traveled a great distance, but because you discovered that even the smallest village is connected to countless others by winding roads, shared stories, and patient travelers carrying news one conversation at a time. As you unharness the horse and help carry the day's purchases inside, another quiet realization settles over you. The medieval world may move slowly, but it is never standing still. And with the turning of the seasons, you will soon witness the event that brings every household together more than any market ever could. the harvest itself, when months of hope are gathered by hand beneath the autumn sky. The harvest that held everything together. Autumn arrives without fanfare. The mornings grow cooler. A light mist settles over the fields before sunrise, and the leaves begin their slow transformation from green to gold. Every day, the wheat bows a little lower beneath its own weight, until at last the village knows the moment has come. Harvest time. For months, every task has quietly led here. The seeds planted in spring. The careful weeding beneath the summer sun. The patient waiting through storms and dry spells alike. Now the earth offers its answer. At first light, families step into the fields together. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of ripe grain and damp soil. Sickles move with practiced rhythm, cutting neat handfuls of wheat that are gently tied into bundles and stood upright to dry beneath the warm autumn sky. There is hard work ahead. Yet there is also quiet satisfaction. Each armful gathered means bread for the winter. Each wagon filled means another season of hope. Neighbors help one another whenever they can. A family whose harvest finishes early lends hands to another whose fields are larger. Older children carry water to the workers. Younger ones collect stray stalks left behind, knowing that even a little grain is worth saving. The village has learned something over many generations. No one truly harvests alone. As the days pass, the once golden fields slowly become open meadows once again. The grain is carried to the barns. The vegetables are stored carefully beneath cool earth. Apples are gathered into baskets. Firewood is stacked neatly beside every cottage. The coming winter is never forgotten. Yet this evening, there is time to rest. As the sun sinks low, the village gathers for a simple meal. Fresh bread rests upon the table. A warm pot of stew fills the room with comforting aromas. There is quiet conversation. Gentle laughter. Gratitude that needs no grand speech. Outside, the first stars appear above the valley. Inside, the familiar hearth glows softly, just as it did on the evening when our story first invited you through the cottage door. You think back over everything you have seen. The smoky little house that sheltered generations. The long days spent in the fields. The careful tending of animals. The village healer doing all she could with the knowledge of her time. The buckets carried patiently from the well. The endless sweeping, mending, baking, and repairing. The workshops filled with steady hands. The church bell calling neighbors together. The market that briefly opened a window onto the wider world. None of these moments seemed extraordinary on their own. Together, they became a life. It is easy to imagine history as a collection of kings, queens, castles, and great battles. Those stories certainly have their place. But most people never stood upon a battlefield. Most never entered a royal palace. Instead, they planted seeds. They baked bread. They comforted children. They repaired fences. They worried through difficult winters. They celebrated good harvests. They loved their families with the same quiet devotion people still do today. Perhaps that is the greatest surprise of all. Across the centuries, so much has changed. Medicine has advanced beyond anything your village could dream. Homes are warmer. Journeys are faster. Knowledge travels at the speed of light instead of the pace of a horse. Yet beneath all those remarkable changes, something familiar remains. People still hope for tomorrow. They still gather around tables to share meals. They still find comfort in kind neighbors, honest work, and the feeling of returning home after a long day. The centuries between then and now are vast. But the human heart has always recognized warmth, kindness, and belonging. The fire beside you burns a little lower. the voices around the table grow softer. One by one, your family prepares for another peaceful night beneath the same faithful roof. Outside, the wind moves gently through the trees, carrying the last leaves of autumn across the quiet fields. The stars continue their slow journey overhead, just as they have for every generation that has ever looked up in wonder. You settle onto your straw mattress near the fading embers. The cottage creaks softly as it always has. Someone whispers a final good night. The village grows still. There is nowhere else you need to be. Nowhere left to hurry. Only this small home. This quiet valley. This ordinary life, lived with extraordinary perseverance. As sleep gently finds you once again, one final thought settles as peacefully as the falling ash upon the hearth. History is not only remembered in castles or crowns. It is also remembered in humble cottages, worn hands, shared bread, and the countless ordinary lives that quietly carried the world from one generation to the next. And somewhere, far beyond the centuries, their story has become your bedtime story. Good night.